Chapter 1874. The night was like a thick ink that covered the night sky. Even the stars in the sky could not be seen. Holy sword crystal. This is a good item to refine a sword soul. Yi Chen-feng was living on Yinjian Peak, which had a beautiful scenery and rich immortal energy. He sat cross-legged on top of an ancient pavilion on Yinjian Peak. He took out a holy sword crystal that Po Wentian had given him and fused it into his ancestral sword soul. After fusing with the holy sword crystal, Yi Chen-feng could clearly feel that his ancestral sword soul had undergone a considerable transformation. The power contained in the sword soul had become purer, and its offensive power had increased by quite a bit. Just as he was about to continue refining the holy sword crystal, his keen perception sensed a feminine aura appear on Yinjian Peak and slowly arrive at the ancient pavilion. Exalted Yi, you has come under the orders of the sect master to give you some cultivation necessities. Can you come in? A gentle and charming voice that could cause one's imagination to run wild rang out under the night sky and entered Yi Chen-feng's ears. Come in. Yi Chen-feng revealed a thought-provoking smile. His body flashed and appeared on the first floor of the ancient pavilion. He opened the tightly shut door and let Yu Fei in. 9 physique. Yi Chen-feng looked at Yu Fei, who was wearing a tight black miniskirt that accentuated her beautiful curves. Her snow-white skin was dazzling under the light as she walked in with her long legs. Yi Chen-feng could smell the rich fragrance coming from her delicate body. However, what Yi Chen-feng liked the most wasn't Yu Fei's foxy appearance or her hot body, but her physique. The 9 physique was a very special physique that had a great nourishing effect on a man's yang physique. Although the 9 physique in Yu Fei's body was not strong, and it was clear that she was often taken by others, to ordinary cultivators, it still possessed a fatal allure. Coupled with her charming appearance and the charm emitted from her every movement, it was enough to make ordinary men fall head over heels for her. However, Yi Chen-feng's heart was firm, and his heart of martial arts was unshakable. He was not affected in the slightest by Yu Fei's charm. Put down the things, and you can leave. Yi Chen-feng glanced at Yu Fei, and guessed the reason for her late-night visit. However, Yi Chen-feng was not interested in Yu Fei, and her 9 physique. He took a sip of the fragrant tea and coldly said, Consecrate Yi, you don't even have a servant girl to serve you. Why don't you let Yu stay behind to serve you? This way, you can also concentrate on your cultivation. Yu Fei walked over to Yi Chen-feng's side, slightly bowed, and filled Yi Chen-feng's cup with spirit tea. As she bowed and poured tea for him, her wide collar hung down deeply, deliberately revealing 2 snow-white soft lumps under Yi Chen-feng's eyelids, revealing her teasing intent. Sure, if you are willing, you can stay here from now on. However, during my cultivation period, you are not allowed to disturb me. Otherwise, don't blame me for being impolite. After guessing Yi Chen-feng's intentions, Yi Chen-feng did not chase Yu Fei away and decided to let her stay. Don't worry, exalted Yi. Yu knows what to do. Although Yi Chen-feng's words were cold, Yu Fei did not reveal any anger on her face. Instead, her charming smile became even wider. Exalted Yi, it's getting late. Do you want Yu to help Exalted Yi rest? Yu Fei looked at Yi Chen-feng with watery eyes, her charming voice constantly stirring Yi Chen-feng's heart. I still need to cultivate. You rest by yourself. With a calm expression, Yi Chen-feng drank the wine in his cup and returned to the top floor of the ancient pavilion. He used his mirror image avatar and left behind a mirror image while his true body entered the universe mirror. Humph! Sooner or later there will be a day when I will have you prostrate beneath my pomegranate skirt and become my subject. After Yi Chen-feng left, the extremely shrewd Yu Fei finally changed her expression. However, she was filled with confidence in her own looks and charm. She believed that sooner or later she would be able to subdue Yi Chen-feng and have him obediently climb into her bed. Ancestral sword soul fuse. Yu Fei's arrival did not affect Yi Chen-feng in the slightest. He eliminated all distracting thoughts and focused on cultivating in the 30 times faster flow of time. He fused the two Saint Sword crystals into his ancestral sword soul, accelerating its transformation and allowing its attack power to reach the peak of a low-grade ancestral artifact. After fusing the Saint Sword crystals, Yi Chunfeng multitasked. He controlled the God-Eater brain to comprehend the ancestral Dao steel, while controlling the Grand Mist blood to refine the ancestral Dragon Eye. Very quickly, 3 months passed in the outside world. How is it, Wentian? Is there anything wrong with Yi Chunfeng? Lawbreaker Sword, who was wearing a gray robe and exuding a powerful sword intent, came to Wentian's training room and asked in a low voice. According to Yu Er's news, Yi Chunfeng has been cultivating in seclusion for the past 3 months. During this time, she hasn't even seen Yi Chunfeng once. Wentian opened his tightly shut eyes and slowly said, I was wondering why Yi Chunfeng could cultivate to this level at such a young age and even refine an ancestral sword soul. So it turns out that he is a cultivation madman. Lawbreaker Sword revealed a faint smile and said, However, this is good news for my mountain-breaking sword sect. We need people like him. That's what I was thinking too. It's best if he keeps cultivating for the next year. That way, we won't have to worry about him, and we'll be able to increase our chances of winning the Ascendant Sword Palace. Powentian nodded. Tell you, to continue observing Yi Chunfeng. It would be best if we can find an opportunity to coax him into bed. This way, we can control him better. Lawbreaker Sword said, Don't worry, Master. I know what to do. Wentian nodded. 5 elements Dao, intent, metamorphosis. Heaven and Earth Dao, intent, metamorphosis. Life and Death Dao, intent, metamorphosis. Illusion Dao, intent, metamorphosis. Heavenly Dao, metamorphosis. Yi Chunfeng had been comprehending the ancestral Dao steel for nearly 15 years in a 30-fold accelerated time flow. He had finally raised his 5 great Dao intents to the ancestral Dao diagram realm. At this time, half a year had passed in the outside world. There were only 8 months left before the Sword Palace contest. Yi Chunfeng's 5 great Dao intents had been raised one after another. Regardless of whether it was the Godless Sword, the Infinite Chaos, or the 3,000 Transformation God Fist, the power of all of them had doubled. After cultivating his 5 great Dao intents to the ancestral Dao diagram realm, Yi Chunfeng focused all his energy on refining the ancestral Dragon's Eye. After nearly 15 years of refining with the Hongmeng blood, Yi Chunfeng had refined the ancestral Dragon's Eye onto his forehead. However, the ancestral Dragon's Eye that the Dragon God had given him contained a terrifying amount of power. He was unable to fully grasp the ancestral Dragon's Eye's power at the moment. Sizzle. Under the nourishment of the Hongmeng blood and the refinement of the Origin Flame, the connection between the ancestral Dragon's Eye and Yi Chunfeng grew closer and closer. Finally, after Yi Chunfeng's unremitting efforts, the ancestral Dragon's Eye had completely fused with Yi Chunfeng. Ancestral Dragon's Eye. After fusing with the eye of the Ancestor Dragon, Yi Chunfeng immediately controlled the eye of the Ancestor Dragon to attack. When a ferocious vertical eye appeared on his forehead, tens of thousands of rays of light seemed to pierce through the 9 heavens and 10 earths, attacking towards the distance. It directly tore open cracks in the extremely tough 5th level of the universe realm, almost piercing through the universe realm. Not bad, not bad. The offensive strength of this ancestral Dragon's Eye really didn't disappoint me. It didn't waste my years of refinement. Yi Chunfeng was extremely satisfied with the offensive strength of the ancestral Dragon's Eye. He felt that if the offensive strength of the ancestral Dragon's Eye was utilized to the limit, it would be comparable to executing the Tao of equipment control and striking out with the Grim Reaper scythe. As for the consumption of controlling the ancestral Dragon's Eye, he didn't care about it at all. Chapter 1875. You Feier, what are you doing? After refining the ancestral Dragon's Eye, Yi Chunfeng came out of seclusion. He dispersed his mirror image and went outside of the ancient pavilion. He saw Yu Fei, wearing a thin skirt and comfortably resting in a clear pond on Yanjian Peak. Hearing Yi Chunfeng's voice, Yu Fei, who had a look of enjoyment on her face, jumped in fright. She hurriedly climbed out of the pool and appeared in front of Yi Chen-feng with her bare, white, and tender feet. While soaking in the pond water, Yu Fei-er's thin skirt clung tightly to her body, revealing her dazzling hot body and snow-white long legs. With Yi Chen-feng's eyesight, he could even faintly see 2 small grapes on her perky breasts. Yi, consecrated Yi, you've come out of seclusion. Although Yu Fei-er knew that she was wearing a thin skirt and revealing a large portion of her alluring body, she didn't show any signs of bashfulness. She blushed as she looked at Yi Chen-feng and coquettishly said, Put on your clothes and take me to the mountain-breaking sword sect. Yi Chen-feng glanced at Yu Fei-er's hot body and nodded as he said coldly, That's right. Yes, consecrated Yi. Yu Fei-er nodded and ran into the ancient pavilion with her bare feet. She quickly put on a snow-white floral dress and walked out of the pavilion. Is there anything fun in this 100 Swords Peak? Yi Chen-feng controlled the powerful immortal spirit energy to form a cloud below his feet. He slowly flew out of Yinjian Peak with the coquettish Yu Fei-er and asked in a low voice, Yes, 100 Swords Peak has 10 great immortal realms and 3 wonders. I'll take consecrated Yi there to take a look. Yu Fei-er gently leaned on Yi Chen-feng and directed Yi Chen-feng towards the depths of 100 Swords Peak. They arrived at one of the 3 wonders, White Dragon Waterfall. What a powerful ancestral power. On the way to the White Dragon Waterfall, Yi Chen-feng controlled the God-Eater brain to quickly deduce. Through the layers of restrictive spells in the 100 Swords Peak, he could vaguely sense a powerful ancestral power. He had a feeling that if his primitive Dao embryo devoured the ancestral power of the mountain-breaking sword sect, it might be able to break through to the 4-star Dao ancestor level. Consecrate Yi, the White Dragon Waterfall is just ahead. Yu Fei-er pointed at a waterfall that flowed down from the center of a cliff that was several thousand feet in the distance. It was like a silver dragon. This White Dragon Waterfall is indeed spectacular. Yi Chen-feng looked at the White Dragon Waterfall in the distance and nodded lightly. He controlled the cloud to slowly descend below the White Dragon Waterfall and discovered that many disciples of the mountain-breaking sword sect were practicing their swordsmanship. Oh, isn't this you? Why did you hook up with another pretty boy? When Yi Chen-feng pretended to look up at the waterfall that was like a silver dragon and controlled the God-Eater brain to pinpoint the exact location of the mountain-breaking sword sect's ancestral power, a discordant voice rang out and entered Yi Chen-feng's ears. Following the source of the voice, 2 graceful women in black martial arts suits walked over provocatively. They were far less beautiful than Yu Fei-er. Yu Fei-er's face darkened as she revealed Yi Chen-feng's identity and warned them coldly. Shui Fei, Lan Yu, don't talk nonsense. This is the chief consecrator of the mountain-breaking sword sect. If you dare to offend consecrator Yi, our sect master will not spare you. Chief consecrator? Is he worthy? At this time, a man in a dark blue martial arts suit, with a body as straight as a sword and sharp sword chi in his every move, broke through the silver dragon waterfall that was more than 10 feet wide. He stepped on a void and looked at Yi Chen-feng with disdain. Lu, consecrator Lu. Yu Fei-er immediately recognized the blue-clothed man as he walked over. Before Yi Chen-feng came to the mountain-breaking sword sect, he was once the head honcho of the mountain-breaking sword sect. His cultivation had reached the peak of the 6-star Dao God realm, and he was only a step away from breaking through to the half-ancestor realm. Consecrator Yi. Consecrator Lu used to be the chief consecrator of the mountain-breaking sword sect. Now that his position has been taken by you, it's inevitable that he will be dissatisfied with you. Yu Fei-er looked at Consecrator Lu with some apprehension and transmitted her voice to him. Consecrator Lu is the strongest consecrator of the mountain-breaking sword sect. He's not someone that can be replaced. If you know what's good for you, hand over the position of the chief consecrator. Otherwise, you'll suffer. Shui Fei and Lan Yu unexpectedly stuck close to Consecrator Lu like little birds and looked at Yi Chen-feng provocatively. Are you speaking for me? Yi Chen-feng retracted his soul power and looked at Consecrator Lu and the other 2 coldly. Are you deaf? If we're not speaking for you, are we speaking for a ghost? Shui Fei, who had a voluptuous figure and two plump breasts, said angrily. I'm in a good mood today. I don't want to kill anyone. You can leave. Although Consecrator Lu's strength was not ordinary, given Yi Qinfeng's current strength and experience, a six-star Dao god was no longer worthy of his attention. Thus, the provocation of these three small fries could not arouse his anger at all. What arrogance! Do you really think that you're a half-Ancestor Realm expert and can suppress me? Consecrator Lu's face was gloomy, and he said unhappily, Let's go. Let's go to the next scenic spot. Yi Qinfeng ignored the provocation of Consecrator Lu and the other two and was about to leave with the furious Yu Fei. However, Yi Qinfeng's disregard turned into fear and retreat in the eyes of Consecrator Lu and the others. Consecrator Lu revealed a malicious smile and suddenly blocked in front of Yi Qinfeng. You want to leave? It's not that easy. Then what do you want? Yi Qinfeng did not expect Consecrator Lu to be so reckless and provoke him again and again. He revealed a dangerous smile and said, Fight with me. I can only leave if I win. If I lose, I will immediately leave the mountain-breaking sword sect and will never find trouble with you again. Consecrator Lu met Yi Qinfeng's deep gaze and continued to provoke him. There's no need to go through so much trouble. If you lose, you can die. Even a clay figurine would have a temper. Faced with Consecrator Lu's repeated provocations, Yi Qinfeng had a trace of killing intent in his heart. He decided to kill the chicken to warn the monkeys and intimidate the flies. You're courting death. Consecrator Lu's face darkened. Streaks of sword qi gushed out of his body and disrupted the space above his head, causing the air to change. As for Yu Fei and the other two, when they felt the sword qi released by Consecrator Lu, they were so frightened that their faces turned pale. They quickly retreated and did not dare to approach him at all. Cloud Mist Sword Technique. Consecrator Lu instantly deduced the power of Sword Wei to the extreme. He summoned a lower Transcendent Saint weapon longsword and used his strongest sword move. He transformed into a sharp sea of swords and swept toward Yi Qinfeng with ear-piercing sounds. How dare you challenge me with such strength? Although Consecrator Lu's Cloud Mist sword technique was powerful, it was not worth mentioning in Yi Qinfeng's eyes. Yi Qinfeng took a step forward gently. Immediately, the power of heaven and earth was under his control. He gently pointed out with his finger. The terrifying finger sword expanded infinitely and shattered the layers of space before him, destroying Consecrator Lu's Cloud Mist sword technique. What? Consecrator Lu's face changed drastically when he saw Yi Qinfeng destroy the Cloud Mist sword technique with a single finger. He spat out several mouthfuls of blood essence into the lower Transcendent Saint sword and activated the extremely powerful tool patterns in the Saint sword. He slashed at the finger sword that was not weakened at all. Kachacha. When Consecrator Lu's sword slashed at the finger sword that tore through space, he felt like he was hit by a meteor. His body trembled violently, and he almost lost his grip on the sword in his hand. In the next moment, the lower Transcendent Saint sword in his hand could not withstand the remaining power of Yi Qinfeng's finger sword. It let out a crisp cracking sound and broke into several pieces. PFFF. Consecrator Lu, who could not dodge in time, spat out a mouthful of blood. He was sent flying by Yi Qinfeng's finger. A deep sword hole appeared on his chest. A large amount of blood spurted out uncontrollably and dyed the ground red. Gulp! Shui Fei and Lan Yu were shocked when they saw Yi Qinfeng destroy the Cloud Mist sword technique with a single finger, shattering the lower Transcendent Saint sword, and sending Consecrator Lu, who was a six-star Dao god, flying with a single finger. Yu Fei's eyes lit up at this moment. Her mind started to work. Consecrator Yi is so powerful. I admit defeat. Consecrator Yi, who was severely injured, was terrified when he saw Yi Qinfeng walking over with his hands behind his back. He had no choice but to lower his noble head and admit defeat in front of everyone. Since you admit defeat, then go and die. Yi Qinfeng was never merciful to his enemies. He raised his right hand gently. Under Consecrator Lu's fearful gaze, He pointed out a second finger. You're not. Before Consecrated Lu could finish his words, an extremely sharp finger light pierced through Consecrated Lu's head. It crushed his soul and killed him on the spot. Let's go. Chapter 1876. Master, Consecrated Lu is dead. He was killed by Yi Chanfeng outside the Silver Dragon Waterfall. Knowing that Yi Chanfeng had killed Consecrated Lu, Polaris immediately came to the cave where the Law of Vanquishing Sword was cultivating and told him the news. Lu Dehui is dead. The Law of Vanquishing Sword opened his murky eyes and revealed a meaningful smile. This Yi Chanfeng did us a favor. Master, is there really something wrong with Lu Dehui? Polaris asked softly as he caught the change in expression on the Law of Vanquishing Sword's face. There should be something wrong with this Lu Dehui. Otherwise, I wouldn't have asked you to push Yi Chanfeng to the position of head consecrator. The Law of Vanquishing Sword nodded and said in a scheming manner, Master, you predicted that Lu Dehui would cause trouble for Yi Chanfeng and use Yi Chanfeng to get rid of him. Polaris said in admiration. That's right. If we kill Lu Dehui, we will attract a lot of unnecessary trouble. Yi Chanfeng has just joined our mountain-crushing sword sect, so no one knows anything about him. If we use him to kill Lu Dehui, it will save us a lot of trouble. The Law Parting Sword nodded. Wentian, find someone to bury Lu Dehui and let Yuer continue to observe Yi Chanfeng. If there's anything wrong, inform me immediately. The Law of Vanquishing Sword said. Okay, I'll arrange it right away. Polaris nodded. Yi Chanfeng, you're more outstanding than I thought. I hope there's nothing wrong with you. Otherwise, I'll have to destroy you. The Law of Vanquishing Sword said coldly. In the evening, the sun was setting in the west, and the sunset glow dyed the horizon red. It was so beautiful that it was fascinating. After following Yu Fei around the Hundred Swords Peak, Yi Chanfeng had basically confirmed the location of the mountain-breaking sword sect's ancestral vein. However, he wasn't in a hurry to make his move and was prepared to wait for another month. Consecrated Yi, after a day of walking, I think you must be tired. I'll go get you a bath and help you bathe. Yu Fei looked at Yi Chanfeng with watery eyes. Her rosy lips parted slightly as she spoke in a coquettish voice. No need. I don't like to be served by others. You should go and rest. Yi Chanfeng shook his head and refused. Consecrated Yi, do you hate me very much? You don't like you or is serving you? Yu Fei gently bit her lips and said in a lovely voice. No, this has nothing to do with you. It's just that I'm used to being alone. Yi Chanfeng said in a low voice. Oh right, this is for you. Study it when you have time. With that said, Yi Chanfeng gave Yu Fei the Cloud Mist Sword Art Cultivation chant that he had obtained from killing revered priest Lu before turning to leave. I will definitely conquer you. Holding the Cloud Mist Sword Art in her hands, Yu Fei was even more determined to conquer Yi Chanfeng. She had a feeling that if she could conquer Yi Chanfeng, her fate would undergo a qualitative change. After returning to the top of the ancient pavilion, Yi Chanfeng briefly inspected revered priest Lu's belongings. He didn't find anything of value, so he left his mirror image outside and entered the universe realm to continue cultivating. Soon, more than a month had passed in the outside world. When there was still half a year before the battle for the Sword Palace, Yi Chanfeng decided to take action and infiltrate the ancestral vein of the mountain-breaking sword sect. Before taking action, Yi Chanfeng had his mirror image enter Yu Fei's room to confuse the spies that Po Wentian had placed by his side. Ah, Consecrated Yi, why have you come? Yu Fei, who was wearing a white chiffon skirt and had a curvaceous figure, exuded a fatal temptation. When she saw Yi Chanfeng, who had been cultivating in seclusion, suddenly appear in her room in the evening, she was immediately overjoyed and welcomed Yi Chanfeng in. I came to ask you if there is anything you don't understand about cultivating the Cloud Mist Sword Art. If there is, I can help you answer it. The mirror image looked at Yu Fei, who was wearing revealing clothes and had half her face covered to seduce others, and said indifferently, There is. Yu Fei was born slow-witted, so comprehending the Cloud Mist Sword Art is indeed quite difficult. There are many things that I don't understand. Yu Fei nodded her head lightly and said, Consecrate Yi, why don't we talk on the bed? Okay. The mirror image nodded and followed Yu Fei to the large bed that exuded a mesmerizing fragrance. At the same time, Yi Qinfeng's true body controlled the universe realm to cross the Yinjian Peak and arrived outside the ancestral land that was enveloped by a powerful restriction. Space Swallower, break the restriction. Yi Chunfeng controlled his powerful soul power to cover the surroundings. When he found that there was no one within a radius of several miles, he summoned the Space Swallower and ordered it to quickly devour the restriction outside the ancestral land. He opened a gap and entered inside. After entering the ancestral land of the mountain-breaking sword sect, Yi Qinfeng felt that the ancestral land of the mountain-breaking sword sect contained a powerful ancestral aura. He also felt a powerful soul aura in the ancestral land. This soul aura was so strong that it had reached the level of a 4-star Dao ancestor. I didn't expect the mountain-breaking sword sect to have such a trump card. A 4-star Dao ancestor could definitely sweep across the entire sword domain. However, in front of Yi Qinfeng, it was not enough. He controlled the universe realm to quietly approach this powerful soul. He was prepared to deal with it first to avoid alerting the enemy. Who is it? When Yi Qinfeng controlled the universe realm to slowly approach it, the soul that had lived in an ancient tree for countless years sensed that something was wrong. A powerful soul fluctuation filled the space and locked onto the universe realm. At that moment, 3 ancient ancestor flags appeared in the universe realm. They quickly waved and formed a large number of ancient runes that instantly sealed the entire space. In the next instant, Yi Chunfeng, Fa Tianzu, and the primitive Dao fetus appeared in the sealed space. Peak Ancestor Realm Almighty. Sensing the vast ancestor chi from Fa Tianzu, the mysterious soul exclaimed in shock, and a strong sense of unease rose in his heart. End this quickly. Suppress him with all your might. Yi Qinfeng ordered. Fa Tianzu used his earth-shattering ancestral aura to attack the mysterious soul. Ancient Sword Tree, attack. Sensing the danger brought by Fa Tianzu, the mysterious soul did not dare to let him get close to it. He controlled the ancient tree that was as sharp as a sword to shake violently. It formed many powerful sword shadows and attacked Fa Tianzu. Primal Chaos Divine Wood, suppress. When Fa Tianzu waved his hand to break the ancient sword tree's attack, Yi Qinfeng summoned the Primal Chaos Divine Wood and controlled it to fly above the ancient sword tree. It extended a large number of 5-colored roots that pierced into the ancient sword tree's extremely tough body. It suppressed the ancient sword tree and forced out the mysterious soul that was hiding in the tree. Who are you? What do you want to do in my mountain-breaking sword sect's ancestral land? The mysterious soul looked at Yi Qinfeng with fear and asked Fa Tianzu, You're just a soul. You don't need to know so much. With that, Yi Qinfeng burned his primordial blood and opened the ancestral dragon's eye on his forehead. Rays of invincible light shot out and attacked the mysterious soul. Sizzle, sizzle, sizzle. In an instant, the mysterious soul's body was pierced by the ancestral dragon's eye and was severely injured. Next, Fa Tianzu unleashed an invincible palm. The terrifying palm light directly exploded the mysterious soul of the 4-star Dao ancestor. God-Eater Brain, devour. After the mysterious soul was destroyed, Yi Qinfeng immediately summoned the God-Eater Brain. He controlled the God-Eater Brain to quickly move and release a powerful devouring power to devour the mysterious soul. In the blink of an eye, the severely injured mysterious soul was devoured by the God-Eater Brain and became its nourishment. Primitive Dao fetus, devour the broken sword ancestral vein. Chapter 1877. Buzz, buzz, buzz. The primitive Dao embryo, which was a 3-star Dao ancestor, had an extremely strong devouring ability. Under its frenzied devouring, the power of the mountain-breaking sword sect's ancestral vein was rapidly drained away. At the same time, the primitive Tao embryo's strength was increasing rapidly. Why is the ancestral vein's power suddenly draining away? Po Wintian, who was rolling around on the bed with a pretty female disciple, suddenly felt the ancestral vein's power being drained away. He sat up on the bed with a shocked expression. Sec Master, what's wrong? A voluptuous girl with a soft body hugged Powuntian's body and asked coquettishly, "Get away from me." Sensing the ancestral vein's power being drained away, Powuntian realized the severity of the situation. He directly sent the girl flying, put on his clothes, and rushed to the ancestral vein of the mountain-breaking sword sect. Powuntian wasn't the only one who sensed the loss of the ancestral vein's power. Lawbreaker, Elder Hua, and the others also sensed it and surrounded the entire ancestral vein. Not good. Lord Sword Spirit's aura has disappeared. When Lawbreaker, Powuntian, and the others arrived at the ancestral vein, they realized that the Sword Spirit who had guarded the ancestral vein for countless years had disappeared. Their faces darkened instantly. Ooh, who did this? The Sword Spirit was the guardian of the mountain-breaking sword sect. His death had a huge impact on the mountain-breaking sword sect. Lawbreaker roared furiously. At this moment, Powuntian thought of Yi Qinfeng and immediately took out his communication pearl to contact Yu Fei-er. At this moment, the red-faced Yu Fei-er was using this excellent opportunity to seduce Yi Qinfeng's mirror image clone. Wintian, is Yi Qinfeng at Yinjian Peak? Lawbreaker asked after calming down. I just contacted Yu-er. Yi Qinfeng is with her and hasn't left Yinjian Peak. Powuntian replied. Then who did this? Lawbreaker's brows were tightly knitted together as he released his powerful soul power to cover the entire ancestral vein, searching for suspicious targets. Yes, there's someone in the ancestral vein. When the powerful soul of the magic-breaking sword penetrated into the ground and found the primitive fetus of Taoism, it was furious. It summoned the treasure of the mountain-breaking sword sect, a golden sword that was an upper-grade, transcendent divine weapon. It cut open the tough ground of the ancestral land and attacked the primitive fetus of Taoism. As Jihao's power increased, the body of the primitive embryo of Tao became tougher and tougher. Therefore, the golden sword couldn't hurt it at all. He relied on his indestructible body to withstand the attacks of the golden swords. He continued to open all of the acupoints in his body, furiously devouring the power of the ancestral bloodline. He slowly accumulated enough energy to break through to the 4-star Tao ancestor level. What are you all standing there for? Attack together with me. The law-breaking sword sect brought his power to the peak. He attacked with his golden sword for half an hour and realized that he could not harm the primitive embryo at all. He immediately ordered everyone from the mountain-breaking sword sect to attack together. He wanted to destroy the primitive embryo and protect the ancestral bloodline. Boom, boom, boom. Under the combined attacks of the mountain-breaking sword sect, the entire ancestral bloodline shook violently. Huge cracks spread in all directions, and the entire 100 Swords peak fell into chaos. The combined attacks of the law-breaking sword, when Tian and the others were powerful, but they still couldn't hurt the primitive embryo of Taoism. Slowly, the power of the ancestral bloodline of the mountain-breaking sword sect became weaker and weaker. In the end, it was completely devoured by the primitive embryo of Taoism. After devouring the ancestral bloodline of the mountain-breaking sword sect, the primitive embryo of Taoism had accumulated enough energy to break through the shackles of its cultivation level and become a 4-star Tao ancestor. Primitive embryo of Taoism, let's leave this place. Yi Qinfeng still had to rely on the mountain-breaking sword sect to participate in the upcoming battle for the Sword Palace and come into contact with the upper echelons of the sword domain. Therefore, he did not let the primitive embryo of Tao go on a killing spree. Instead, he let Yi Qinfeng take the universe realm and fly out of the mountain-breaking sword sect at an extreme speed. The sword soul was killed, and the ancestral bloodline was devoured. The law-breaking sword and Wintian were in a frenzy. They roared furiously and attacked with the two treasures of the mountain breaking sword sect, ignoring the terrifying power of the primitive embryo of Taoism. However, their attacks were like tickles to the primitive embryo of Taoism. They couldn't hurt it at all. Wentian, leave this guy to me. Quickly activate the sect protecting formation and seal off the entire mountain breaking sword sect. Don't let him escape. The law-breaking sword ordered loudly. Yes, master. Wentian nodded and summoned a powerful formation plate. He activated the sect protecting formation and formed a powerful seal. It sealed off the entire 100 Swords peak and sealed off the escape route of the primitive embryo of Taoism. Primitive embryo of Taoism, kill. After the 100 Swords peak was sealed, Yi Chunfeng immediately ordered the primitive embryo of Taoism through the universe mirror. After receiving the order, the primitive embryo of Taoism gave up on escaping. It suddenly turned around and punched at the law-breaking sword who was chasing after it. With that punch, heaven and earth changed. The terrifying fist radiance shattered the entire space. With a suffocating power, it shattered the golden sword radiance that the law-breaking sword had slashed down and went straight for the sword's chest. Although the law-breaking sword dodged the punch with his speed, the force of the punch was too great. When it hit the void, the rebound force caused the law-breaking sword's blood to boil. It was very uncomfortable. Why are you doing this? What grudge do you have at the mountain-breaking sword sect? Why did you kill our guardian's soul and destroy our ancestral bloodline? After experiencing the power of the punch, the law-breaking sword suppressed the boiling blood in his body and hid far away. He questioned in a low voice, "If you don't want to die, open the formation obediently and let me leave. Otherwise, I don't mind slaughtering the entire mountain-breaking sword sect." The primitive embryo of Taoism opened its mouth and warned in a hoarse voice. Hearing the primitive embryo of Taoism's warning, the law-breaking sword was furious. However, he was indeed a little worried about the primitive embryo of Taoism. "I'll count to 3. If you don't start the battle, don't blame me for killing," the primitive embryo of Taoism said with murderous intent. "Master, what should we do?" Losing the sword spirit and the ancestral bloodline was equivalent to cutting off the arms of the mountain-breaking swordmaster. Facing the invincible and extraordinarily powerful primitive embryo of Tao, Wentian was at a loss. He had no choice but to send a message to the law-breaking sword. What should we do? The law-breaking sword was also troubled. 1, 2, 3. Since you don't know what's good for you, let me send you to hell. Just then, while the law-breaking sword and the others were hesitating, the primitive embryo of Taoism counted to 3. Then, like an invincible god of war, he attacked the strongest sword of the mountain-breaking sword sect, carrying a suffocating amount of ancestral power. Wait! The primitive embryo of Taoism attacked with murderous intent. The law-breaking sword was scared. However, the primitive embryo of Taoism didn't care about him at all. It kept punching out fist radiance that shattered the golden sword radiance and attacked his body. Borrowing the power of the golden sword, the law-breaking sword blocked the 3 space-shattering fist lights launched by the primitive embryo of Tao with brute force. But the sword couldn't take it anymore. The golden sword of the mountain-breaking sword sect was cracked by the primitive embryo of Taoism's powerful fists. Go to hell. The primitive embryo of Taoism suddenly moved. Under the horrified gaze of the law-breaking sword, it suddenly closed in and tore his attack apart. It grabbed his body. The law-breaking sword let out a painful cry. His entire body was torn in half by the primitive embryo of Taoism. His soul was also destroyed by the ancestral light that the primitive embryo of Taoism spat out. Chapter 1878. Do you still want to stop me? After tearing apart the body of the half-ancestor level sword, the primitive embryo of Tao looked at Po Wentian and the others, who were trembling in fear. No, we don't dare. Po Wentian was scared out of his wits by the primitive embryo of Tao's strength. Under the primitive embryo of Tao's cold gaze, he obediently opened the sect's protective formation and allowed the primitive embryo of Tao to leave. Sect Master, what should we do? Great Elder Hu looked at the body of the law-breaking sword in a pool of blood, and his mind was in a mess. Seal off all news. If anyone dares to spread what happened today, I'll kill them. Powentian ordered with a dark expression. He really couldn't understand why such a thing would happen to the mountain-breaking sword sect at such a critical moment. Not only was the guardian sword spirit killed, the ancestral vein was broken, and the law-breaking sword was also killed. Could that person be Lu Dehui's accomplice? A thought flashed through Powentian's mind. However, he quickly dismissed this thought. If that person was Lu Dehui's accomplice, he wouldn't have killed the law-breaking sword, but Yi Chunfeng instead. Could this be just an accident? Or is there someone who doesn't want our mountain-breaking sword sect to enter the sword palace? Powentian felt like his mind was in a mess. At this moment, Yi Chunfeng put the primitive embryo of Tao back into the universe realm and met up with his mirror image clone in the forest of the Hundred Swords Peak. Wentian Sect Master, what happened? Yi Chunfeng looked at Powentian, whose eyebrows were tightly knitted together. His expression was so dark that it looked like water was about to drip from it. Sigh, Honored Elder Yi, our mountain-breaking sword sect is finished. Powentian took a deep look at Yi Chunfeng, but didn't see a trace of doubt on his face. He sighed, then simply explained what had happened. Looks like there's someone who doesn't want your mountain-breaking sword sect to win the Sword Palace competition. Yi Chunfeng said in a low voice. Honored Elder Yi, you mean that the mastermind behind this is the heaven-shaking sword sect? Powentian's frown became even tighter. Actually, this matter is not difficult to analyze. Yi Chunfeng slowly said, Sect Master Wentian, you just said that when that person destroyed your mountain-breaking sword sect's ancestral vein and killed the guardian soul, he didn't start a massacre. Instead, he wanted to leave quickly. It was you who blocked his path of retreat and killed the old sect master. That's right. Powentian nodded. From this, it can be seen that even though that person is strong, he has his reservations. What he is worried about is not the overall strength of the mountain-breaking sword sect, but the ancestral rules of the sword region. If he starts a massacre, it will definitely alert the 3 sword palaces and even the sword god hall. When that happens, it's very likely that something unexpected will happen. That's why he's only destroying the foundation of your mountain-crushing sword sect. That way, even if your mountain-crushing sword sect becomes a sword palace, you won't be a threat to them in the short term. Yi Chunfeng said patiently. These hypocrites. Powentian was already at a loss of what to do. Now that he heard Yi Chunfeng's analysis, he felt that it made sense. He gritted his teeth and said, Sir Yi, what do you think we should do now? With the death of Lawbreaker, Yi Chunfeng's importance to the mountain-crushing sword sect had become even more important. He asked, their most basic plan is to prevent the mountain-crushing sword sect from becoming a sword palace. If we become a sword palace, we can destroy their plan. If we become a sword palace, we can borrow a large amount of resources to rebuild the mountain-crushing sword sect. As for the ancestral vein, we can slowly make up for it. Yi Chunfeng changed the topic and continued to guide Powentian. As for who the mastermind is, I think we'll be able to find out during the battle for the Sword Palace. Sigh, with the death of Master, the chances of our mountain-crushing sword sect becoming a sword palace are very slim. Moreover, they have such a terrifying expert holding the fort. Powentian sighed helplessly. He felt a deep sense of helplessness. Wentian's sect leader, if you trust me, leave everything to me. I'll do my best to help your mountain-crushing sword sect become a sword palace. Yi Chunfeng said as he looked at the powerless Powentian. Sir Yi, I appreciate your good intentions. However, the person who came to cause trouble is too terrifying. I suspect that he's a 2-star or even a 3-star Tao ancestor. Powentian shook his head and said helplessly, Wentian's sect leader, I refined the sacred sword crystal you gave me some time ago. My ancestral sword spirit has been greatly tempered. If you can give me a few more crystals, in addition to the secret technique that Master passed on to me, I might be able to defeat a 3-star Tao ancestor. Yi Chenfeng felt that the sacred sword crystal was extremely beneficial for tempering an ancestral sword spirit. He was prepared to get a few more crystals to increase the power of his ancestral sword spirit. Really? Po Wentian's eyes lit up. That depends on whether Wentian sect leader is willing to bet on me, Yi Chenfeng said with a faint smile. All right, I'll give you 3 more sacred sword crystals. Even if my mountain-crushing sword sect fails in the end, I'll make those bastards pay a painful price. Po Wentian gritted his teeth and reluctantly took out 3 more sacred sword crystals and gave them to Yi Chenfeng. Don't worry, I'll avenge the mountain-crushing sword sect for you. Obtaining these 3 sacred sword crystals was enough for his ancestral sword spirit to undergo a transformation and increase its power to the level of a middle-grade ancestral artifact. Because of the huge change in the mountain-crushing sword sect, Po Wentian directly sealed off the 100 Swords Peak and used bloody methods to reorganize the mountain-crushing sword sect, killing all suspicious people. After obtaining the 3 sacred sword crystals, Yi Chenfeng ignored Yu Feier's enticement and began to cultivate in seclusion. He refined the 3 sacred sword crystals into his ancestral sword spirit and increased its power to the level of a middle-grade ancestral artifact. When Yi Chenfeng was tempering his ancestral sword spirit, he swallowed the sword spirit of a 4-star Dao ancestor. The god-devouring brain slowly evolved and gave birth to an extremely powerful child brain. Through sensing, Yi Chenfeng felt that this child brain could easily control the soul consciousness of a peak ancestral realm expert. Days passed, and the battle for the Sword Palace was getting closer and closer. In order to avoid Yu Feier's harassment, Yi Chenfeng had been hiding in the Cosmos realm to cultivate and break through to the 2-star Dao ancestor realm. However, after cultivating for several years in a 30-fold time flow, Yi Chenfeng did not make a breakthrough. After refining 2 Chaos Divine fruits in succession, the Chaos Divine beast in his body had increased by more than 10 times. However, he made a breakthrough and reached the 2-star Dao ancestor realm. Just as Yi Chenfeng was completely immersed in cultivation, the remnant soul he left outside sensed Po Wentian's aura appear in the Yanjian Peak. Guessing that they were about to enter, he left the Cosmos realm and went outside. Honored Yi, there are less than 10 days before the battle for the Sword Palace. Let's go to the Sky Sword Mountain. Po Wentian, who looked slightly haggard, said, Okay. Chapter 1879. The Sky Sword Mountain was the 2nd highest peak in the sword domain. Its height was second only to the Divine Sword Peak, where the Heavenly Sword Hall was located. It was like an invincible divine sword that was inserted in the northeast of the sword domain. As the Sky Sword Mountain was too tall, the mountainside was already in the clouds. The peak of the Sky Sword Mountain was covered in snow all year round. Without a certain level of strength, it was impossible to reach the peak. We're here. The peak in front is the Sky Sword Mountain. Po Wentian pointed to the Sky Sword Mountain in front of them. Most of the peak was in the clouds, making it impossible to see the peak clearly. What a powerful sword intent! Seeing the Sky Sword Mountain getting closer and closer, Yi Chenfeng felt a powerful sword intent from the Sky Sword Mountain. He had a feeling that if the sword intent of the Sky Sword Mountain was fully released, it would probably be able to kill several Ancestor Realm Almighties in an instant. Let's go. The Sky Sword Mountain is the sacred mountain of the sword domain. In order to show our respect to the sacred mountain, everyone must climb from the foot of the mountain. Po Wentian stopped the warship at the foot of the heavenly assassin sword and led Yi Chenfeng and the rest along an ancient stone path to the peak. At that moment, another huge warship appeared. Looking at the flag hanging high on the warship, Po Wentian recognized that it was the Hunyuan Sword Sect's warship. The Hunyuan Sword Sect's overall strength was originally on par with the mountain-breaking sword sect. However, after the Lawbreaker sword was killed by the primitive embryo of Dao, the mountain-breaking sword sect strength was no longer comparable to the Hunyuan Sword Sect's. Yo, isn't this the sect master of Wentian's seeking? You're early. A sarcastic voice suddenly sounded from a warship. The Hunyuan sword sect master, who was dressed in a black robe and had a divine sword on his back, led more than 10 Hunyuan sword sect experts and leaped off the warship. Sect master Wentian seeking. Why are you the only one leading the team? Where's the lawbreaker sword sect master? Why isn't he here? Just as Po Wentian was about to ignore the Hunyuan sect master and lead Yi Chunfeng and the rest away, the Hunyuan sword sect master continued speaking. Hearing the Hunyuan sect master mention the lawbreaker sword sect master, Po Wentian's eyelids twitched. He knew that the Hunyuan sect master must have known about the lawbreaker sword sect master's death and was deliberately humiliating him. Primordial chaos sect master, don't you know that the law-breaking sword is already dead? Po Wentian forcefully suppressed the anger in his heart. Just as he was about to leave, a deep voice resounded in the sky, Sword Mountain. Tantai Fa. Hearing this voice, Po Wentian immediately recognized that this voice belonged to his old rival, the Tantai clan's patriarch, Tantai Fa. Heaven-seeking sect leader, ignore them. Seeing Po Wentian's ashen face and veins bulging on his forehead, Yi Chunfeng patted his shoulder gently and said, "Dogs bite people, but people cannot bite dogs. Furthermore, dogs that bite people will not bark randomly." Haha, consecrated Yi Chunfeng is right, they're just a bunch of wild dogs. Hearing Yi Chunfeng's sharp counterattack, Breaking Sky laughed loudly. Yes. The Hunyuan sect master didn't expect Yi Chunfeng to be so bold as to call him a dog in public. His face darkened as he looked at Yi Chunfeng, his eyes filled with killing intent. Po Wentian, your master has been killed. Your mountain-breaking sword sect is no longer qualified to fight for the Sword Palace. If you know what's good for you, scram as far as you can. Don't embarrass yourself. The Hunyuan sect master warned with an unfriendly expression. You don't need to worry about whether my mountain-breaking sword sect is qualified or not. Po Wentian coldly snorted and said, you should think more about the Hunyuan sword sect. Let's go. With that, Po Wentian no longer paid attention to the Hunyuan sect master and the others. He led Yi Chunfeng and the others up the mottled stone steps, step by step, towards the peak of the sky sword mountain. Po Wentian, you better pray that you don't run into my Hunyuan sword sect. Otherwise, I will make you pay with your blood. The Hunyuan sect master glared viciously at Yi Chunfeng and Po Wentian's backs as he gritted his teeth and swore to himself. Consecrated Yi, do you think the Hunyuan sword sect and Tantai clan are behind this? Po Wentian clenched his fists and asked coldly. I can't tell right now, but the mountain-breaking sword sect has been sealed. The news of the old sect master's death still spread, which means there are still spies in the mountain-breaking sword sect. Yi Chunfeng walked at an even pace as he replied. On the way up, he controlled the God-Eater brain to quickly deduce. He silently comprehended the sword intent in the sky sword mountain and deepened his understanding of the way of the sword. I didn't expect that there would still be traitors in the mountain-breaking sword sect after I massacred them, Po Wentian said with an ugly expression. It seems that the various major powers have long been plotting against my mountain-breaking sword sect. The sky sword mountain was tens of thousands of meters high, and the mountain roads were built around it. It would take a very long time to reach the peak. As the distance increased, Yi Chunfeng felt a powerful sword intent gushing down through the layers of clouds. With his strength and status, he was unable to reach the peak of the sky sword mountain under the pressure of such a terrifying sword intent. Swish, swish, swish. As they walked, an ear-piercing sound suddenly entered the ears of Yi Chunfeng and the others. Following the source of the sound, they saw a man dressed in a long white robe. His entire body was like an unsheathed sword, and he gave off an extremely dangerous feeling. He stepped on the steep mountain walls and rushed towards the peak of the sky sword mountain at an extremely fast speed. Zhentian Xing, the #1 genius of the Zhentian sword sect. I didn't expect him to have broken through to the one-star Dao ancestor realm. Feeling the powerful sword intent emanating from the white-robed man's body, Po Wentian's face changed slightly, revealing a trace of solemnity. Yi Chunfeng glanced at Zhentian Xing and lost interest in him. Although Zhentian Xing, who had broken through to the one-star Dao ancestor realm in less than 5,000 years of cultivation, was amazing enough, and his strength was enough to suppress the entire mountain-breaking sword sect, he was nothing in front of Yi Qinfeng. With Yi Qinfeng's current strength, he could kill him with just one punch. The Zhentian sword sect should be our biggest enemy, Great Elder was said in a low voice. He's just a one-star Dao ancestor. There's no need to fear him. Let's continue climbing. Yi Qinfeng said casually. He continued to walk at an even pace along the winding mountain road towards the peak of the Sky Sword Mountain. Not long after, Yi Qinfeng and the others felt a powerful aura appear again. Through the slowly drifting sea of clouds, Yi Qinfeng and the others could vaguely see a graceful figure emitting five-colored light shuttling through the sea of clouds at high speed. Qian Bingzi, the princess of the Qian family. I didn't expect her to have broken through to the one-star Dao ancestor realm. Watching the figure disappear in front of him, Po Wentian was shocked. He never thought that so many juniors would surpass him in realm. Can he really turn the tide? Po Wentian glanced at Yi Qinfeng, who was calm and unaffected, and placed all his hopes on him. Thump, thump, thump. After several hours of rapid climbing, Yi Qinfeng and the others gradually approached the peak of the Sky Sword Mountain, where the temperature was constantly dropping and large snowflakes were drifting down. Suddenly, they felt that the snow-covered mountain was slightly shaking. An abnormally strong man dressed in animal skin, revealing his red muscles. His long black hair casually draped over his shoulders, giving off an unrestrained feeling. He was stepping on the hard mountain walls of the Sky Sword Mountain, leaving many footprints. Tantai Xiong. How can it be him? Isn't he dead? Looking at the man in animal skin, Po Wentian's eyes widened. He was so shocked that it was as if he had seen a ghost. Hearing Po Wentian's exclamation, Tantai Xiong's gloomy eyes shone brightly. He glanced at the stunned Po Wentian and revealed a mouthful of white teeth. What a clown! After saying that, Tantai Xiong ignored Po Wentian and the others. Like a violent bear, he continued to step on the mountain walls and arrived at the peak of the Sky Sword Mountain. Yi Qinfeng glanced at Tantai Xiong, who had restrained his aura, and said indifferently, Wentian sect master, why do the other families have progenitor experts but not your mountain-breaking sword sect? Sigh, bad luck, bad luck. Po Wentian sighed softly and didn't say much. However, from his expression, he could tell that there was a story about the mountain-breaking sword sect. Chapter 1880. Reaching the peak of the Sky Sword Mountain, Po Wentian could see from afar that there was a simple and crude stone palace covered in white snow. Inside the stone palace, there were more than a dozen experts with terrifying auras and suffocating sword auras. The experts from the heaven-shaking sword sect, the Tantai clan, and the Qian clan, who had arrived early, were all waiting outside the stone palace. No one dared to enter the stone palace to drink tea. However, on their faces, there was no trace of unhappiness. Instead, there was deep respect. Chiju's sword palace. Looking at the dozen men and women in long robes who were slowly sipping tea, Po Wentian immediately recognized them. They were the experts from the Chiju's sword palace, the head of the 3 palaces in the sword region. The white-haired elder leading them was the great elder of the Chiju's sword palace. He had cultivated the Chiju's sword technique to the great completion realm and was at the peak of the 4-star Dao ancestor realm. He was known for his fiery temper, Zhu Yanlong. Come, follow me to greet great elder Zhu. Po Wentian showed a respectful expression and immediately led Yi Qinfeng and the others to the stone palace. He respectfully knelt on the ground and said, Wentian brings the disciples of the mountain-breaking sword sect to greet great elder Zhu and the seniors of the Chiju's sword palace. Po Wentian, I find that your mountain-breaking sword sect is getting bolder and bolder. There is actually someone who is not kneeling when greeting great elder Zhu. The Tantai clan master, who did not have a good relationship with the mountain-breaking sword sect, was wearing a black robe and had a black beard around his mouth. He was at the half-martial ancestor realm. He deliberately provoked Yi Qinfeng, who was standing there silently with a calm expression. Po Wentian raised his head and looked at Yi Chen-feng, who was standing alone. He was so frightened that his expression changed. He quickly said, "Honored Yi, what are you doing? Quickly kneel with me and greet Great Elder Ju." Yi Chen-feng glanced at Tantai Fa and said indifferently, "I don't have the habit of kneeling to others." Po Wentian, who is he? The hot-tempered Zhu Yanlong put down the teacup in his hand and looked at the proud Yi Chen-feng. His expression gradually darkened as he asked in a low voice. Beads of sweat appeared on Po Wentian's forehead as he tried to calm himself down and explained, "Grand Elder, Yi Qingyu is a guest elder that our mountain-breaking sword sect just recently recruited." "Humph, Po Wentian, you need to keep your eyes open when you're recruiting guests in the future. Recruiting people who don't know the immensity of heaven and earth will bring disaster to your mountain-breaking sword sect." Zhu Yanlong snorted and lectured him in a superior tone. Yes, Pa Tian will remember Great Elder's lesson." Po Wentian nodded and wiped the cold sweat off his forehead. He had the urge to break off relations with Yi Chen-feng. Yi Chen-feng could hear the unfriendliness in Zhu Yanlong's tone, but he did not show any signs of panic. It was as if even if the sky fell, it would not make him change his expression. He stood in silence. Howl! Howl! Just when the atmosphere was a little strange, a high-pitched wolf howl suddenly sounded from the peak of Sky Sword Mountain. It shattered the snowflakes falling from the sky and startled Zhu Yanlong and the others. "Bronze Sword Envoy is here." Zhu Yanlong and the other experts of the Qiju Sword Palace stood up one after another and went to the stone hall to greet him. Po Wentian and the others who were still kneeling on the ground were completely ignored by them. 4-star Dao Ancestor. Yi Chen-feng's pupils shrank. He found that the man riding the demon wolf was a 4-star Dao Ancestor. His strength was above Zhu Yanlong's. His mount, the Blood Wolf, was also extraordinary. It had reached the 3-star Demon Ancestor realm and was strong enough to defeat the 4 major sword sections. However, he had comprehended the 5 Ancestor-level Dao diagrams and condensed the eye of the Ancestor Dragon. He was fully capable of killing a 4-star Dao Ancestor. Bronze Sword Envoy's arrival did not disrupt his plan. "Grand Elder Ju, everyone, we meet again." Bronze Sword Envoy's bearded face showed a somewhat old-fashioned smile as he spoke in a slightly hoarse voice. "Yes, 10 years have passed in the blink of an eye. I'm older, but Bronze Sword Envoy is only a step away from becoming a 4-star Dao Ancestor." Although Zhu Yanlong was the Grand Elder of 7 Sword Palace and had a high status, he did not dare to act rashly in front of Bronze Sword Envoy. "Haha, Grand Elder Ju, you must be joking. I think you're old but vigorous. You may not become a 4-star Dao Ancestor later than me." Bronze Sword Envoy had a good relationship with Zhu Yanlong. When he spoke, he showed a rare smile. "Yi Chen-feng, don't be reckless later. Neither Bronze Sword Envoy nor 7 Sword Palace are people that our mountain-breaking sword sect can offend." Po Wentian called Yi Chen-feng aside and warned him seriously as he looked at Zhu Yanlong, Bronze Sword Envoy, and the others, who were exchanging pleasantries. "Reckless?" Yi Chen-feng smiled faintly and said, "Even if Sword God was here, I would not kneel because they are not worthy." "Yi Chen-feng, do you want to die? Stop talking nonsense. You will get our mountain-breaking sword sect killed." Yi Chen-feng's words scared Po Wentian and the others out of their wits. Po Wentian wished he could seal Yi Chen-feng's big mouth to prevent the mountain-breaking sword sect from being implicated by him. Huh. At this moment, a contemptuous laugh sounded. "If Sword God was here, you would not kneel." Qian Bingzi, who was wearing a robe and exuding a cold aura, was tall and slender. She was only a little shorter than Yi Chen-feng. When she heard Yi Chen-feng's words, she walked over slowly with a cold smile on her beautiful face. "I will not kneel." Yi Chen-feng glanced at Qian Bingzi's beautiful face and slender figure and said coldly, "Arrogant and conceited guy, you're only here to show off. However, with your strength and status, I'm afraid you won't be able to see Lord Sword God in your entire life." Qian Bingzi rolled her eyes at Yi Chen-feng, not believing his words. "No, I will see him very soon." Yi Chen-feng shook his head and said seriously, Heaven-seeking sect master, if your mountain-shattering sword sect doesn't want to be annihilated, then you should chase this lunatic away as soon as possible. Otherwise, he will really bring disaster to your mountain-shattering sword sect. The Qian family had a good relationship with a mountain-breaking sword sect. Qian Bingzi warned him coldly and turned to leave. Yi Qinfeng, Ancestor Yi, I'm afraid of you. Can't you just keep your mouth shut? My mountain-breaking sword sect really can't bear the consequences. Po Wentian was truly scared and begged. You're scared. Yi Qinfeng smiled and didn't continue speaking. If Po Wentian knew that Yi Qinfeng had changed his mind and was preparing to start a massacre in the Sword Palace competition, he would probably go crazy from fear. And more people are coming. Just as Yi Qinfeng was standing in the snow in silence, waiting for the Sword Palace ranking competition to start, his powerful soul power suddenly felt 4 powerful auras appear at the peak of the Sky Sword Mountain, causing him to frown slightly. Very soon, the experts of the various superpowers also felt the 4 powerful auras and looked at the mountain path. Through the heavy snow, they saw 2 men and 2 women with swords on their backs. They wore the same white martial arts robes and walked on the snow without leaving a trace. Who are they? Chapter 1881. The people from the mysterious sword cave heaven are here. Seeing the 4 people walking in the snow, Bronze Sword Envoy, Zhu Yanlong, and the others who were drinking tea in the stone hall, stood up and walked out to greet them. Mysterious sword, cave heaven? What kind of power is this? Why have I never heard of it? But they are definitely not simple, since Bronze Sword Envoy and Great Elder Zhu have come to greet them. Seeing Bronze Sword Envoy and the others walk out of the stone hall to greet them, the experts from the 3 sects and 2 clans felt that they were not simple. Mysterious sword, cave heaven. Could it be? A thought flashed through Yi Qinfeng's mind. Everyone, let me introduce them to you. Bronze Sword Envoy nodded to the 4 people and said in a hoarse voice, These 4 are from the mysterious sword, cave heaven. Like you, they are here to participate in the Sword Palace contest. What? Hearing this, the 3 sects and 2 clans were in an uproar. The 5 sect masters felt that something was wrong. So the Sword Palace contest is held for them. Yi Qinfeng smiled faintly and confirmed his guess. The Sword Realm suddenly held the Sword Palace contest, not for the benefit of the 3 sects and 2 clans, but for the mysterious sword, cave heaven. The Sword Palace contest was just a formality. Bronze Sword Envoy, Great Elder, didn't you say that only the 3 sects and 2 clans are qualified to participate in the Sword Palace contest? Hun Yuan's sect master also found the key to the problem and said unwillingly, The mysterious sword emperor approved the mysterious sword, cave heaven. If you have any questions, you can ask him. Bronze Sword Envoy said coldly. The smile on his face disappeared. Mysterious sword emperor, mysterious sword, cave heaven. The mysterious sword emperor was as famous as the Sky Sword Emperor. He was second only to the sword god in the heavenly sword hall. His swordsmanship was superb, and his strength had reached the 6-star Tao ancestor realm. He was second only to one person. At this moment, the experts from the 3 sects and 2 clans were disappointed. All their hopes and ambitions were gone at this moment. At this moment, they felt like they were reading books with the Crown Prince. They had completely become his background. Maybe Master's death has something to do with this mysterious sword wonderland, Po Wentian murmured in his heart. However, he could vaguely guess the relationship between the mysterious sword paradise and the mysterious sword emperor. Even if he was given 10,000 guts, he would not dare to seek revenge from the mysterious sword paradise. All right, since no one has any more questions, we can begin the battle for the Sword Palace. No matter which force suppresses the other forces and obtains the final victory, it will be the 4th Sword Palace of our sword region. When the 4 from Mysterious Sword Cave arrived, the Copper Sword Emissary did not waste any more time. He summoned a bronze battle arena, which floated in the air. When he released the restrictions on the bronze battle arena, the battle arena continued to expand and sat heavily on the peak of the Sky Sword Mountain. Mid-grade, transcendent holy treasure. Yi Qinfeng did not expect the heavenly sword hall to have such a treasure. He had a new estimation of the foundation of the heavenly sword hall. All right, I will now announce the rules of the Sword Palace battle. The Copper Sword emissary looked around at the crowd with different expressions and announced loudly, "The Sword Palace battle will be a single elimination round. Each force can send 4 people to participate in the battle. Once the candidates have been decided, no substitutions will be allowed. The last person who has the last laugh will advance. Now, family heads, please draw lots to decide your opponents." As he spoke, 6 white balls of light appeared in the Copper Sword emissary's hand and floated in the air. In the end, after drawing lots, the mountain-breaking sword sect met their old rival, the Tantai family. The strongest heaven-shaking sword sect met the Qian family. The mysterious sword cave met the Hunyuan sword sect. All right, now, the experts from the mysterious sword cave and the Hunyuan sword sect who have drawn lot number 1. Please come to the battle arena. After the drawing of lots, the first battle began immediately. Whoosh! An ear-piercing sound pierced through the air. Xian Xia, who was wearing a white martial arts suit, was not tall, but full of charm. Rays of light flashed under her feet as she appeared on the bronze battle arena. Silence awaited her opponent. Sect head, let me go up and test her strength. The number 1 disciple of the Hunyuan sword sect, Yuan Zhua, who had cultivated the glazed diamond body and had broken through to the half-ancestor realm, said with high fighting spirit. All right. The Hunyuan sword sect head nodded. He looked at Xian Xia, whose body was covered in a layer of white light, and said in a low voice, "Do what you can and don't try to be brave. Don't worry, sect head. I will win this battle." Although Yuan Zhua had not broken through to the ancestor realm, he had cultivated the glazed diamond body to the greater mastery realm. His physical body was comparable to a half-ancestor artifact. In addition, he had cultivated the Hunyuan sword art to the greater mastery realm. He was strong enough to fight an ordinary ancestor realm expert. If you can block 3 of my attacks, you win. The delicate Xian Xia looked at the burly Yuan Zhua who had leaped onto the battle arena and said coldly, with high fighting spirit, "Whoosh!" As soon as Xian Xia finished speaking, the 3 sects and 2 families were in an uproar. Although Yuan Zhua had not broken through to the ancestor realm, he had cultivated the glazed diamond body to the greater mastery realm. His offense and defense were strong. Ordinary ancestor realm experts would not dare to say that they could defeat him in 3 attacks. Could this little girl be an ancestor realm expert? An inconceivable thought appeared in the soul sea of the experts from the various factions. Okay, remember what you said. Yuan's were revealed a dangerous smile. He stimulated the power of his bloodline. His strong body continued to expand. The muscles on his body swelled to the limit. A layer of dark golden light covered the surface of his body, releasing a strong sense of oppression. Maybe I won't need 3 attacks. When Yuan's were raised the defense of the glazed diamond body to the limit, Xian Xia made her move. The long sword hanging behind her let out an ear-piercing sound and flew into her hand. With a slash of the sword, the entire space shook violently. The terrifying sword light left a deep sword scar in the air as it slashed towards Yuan's body. The speed of this sword attack was too fast. It was so fast that no one had time to think. However, the focused Yuan's caught the trajectory of this sword attack and immediately used the Hunyuan sword art to meet it. Kachacha! When Yuan's was Hunyuan sword light and Yu Xianxia's sword light collided, the Hunyuan sword light shattered like glass. What? Yuan's eyes widened. He couldn't believe that his full power attack was broken so easily. Just when he wanted to dodge, this extreme sword light ruthlessly slashed his body, leaving a deep sword scar on his body that was comparable to a pseudo-ancestor artifact. He was forced to retreat step by step. Second sword. After injuring Yuan Zhua with 1 sword attack, Xian Xia followed up with another attack. She lightly tapped the ground with the tip of her foot and leaped high into the air. In an instant, hundreds of incomparably sharp sword shadows appeared, cutting through all obstacles and slashing towards Yuan Zhua, whose expression changed greatly. Chi! 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 Amidst the dense shattering sounds, Yuan's continuous attacks were shattered. The dense sword shadows continued to slash his body, riddling his glazed diamond body with thousands of holes. He was thrown hundreds of meters away, directly falling out of the stage and losing the battle. In just 2 moves, the number 1 genius of the Han Yuan sword sect, Yuan Zhua, who had cultivated the glazed diamond body to the great success stage, had lost the battle. Chapter 1882. Next, after defeating Yuan Zhua, Xian Xia looked at the ashen-faced Han Yuan sect master and the others and said domineeringly, "1-star Tao ancestor. How can mysterious sword cave heaven be so strong? They just sent a little girl, and she's already a 1-star Tao ancestor." Seeing Xian Xia's strength, Powentian was shocked. The Tao ancestor realm was his life's goal, but he couldn't cross the last step. He couldn't imagine how Xian Xia had become a 1-star Tao ancestor. Not only is Xian Xia a 1-star Tao ancestor, the sword in her hand is also a quasi-ancestral artifact. Yi Qinfeng's eyes were extremely sharp. With a single glance, he could tell that Xian Xia was a quasi-ancestral artifact. It seems that our mountain-breaking sword sect has no hope of winning the Sword Palace battle. Powentian sighed deeply and said in despair, "Not necessarily." Yi Qinfeng shook his head. However, after seeing Xian Xia's strength, no one in the mountain-breaking sword sect thought highly of Yi Qinfeng. In their opinion, Xian Xia alone could defeat them. Moreover, there were still 3 people from Mysterious Sword Cave Heaven who hadn't fought yet, and they were probably stronger. "Let me." Han Yuan sect master took a deep breath and appeared on the bronze fighting arena with the Han Yuan sword sect's most precious treasure, a supreme-grade, transcendent divine weapon. Although Han Yuan sect master was slightly stronger than Yuan Zhua, there was a limit to his strength. He was only able to block 4 of Xian Xia's attacks before he was sent flying out of the arena by Xian Xia's fierce killing move, losing the match. Han Yuan sword sect admits defeat. The 2 strongest people were defeated by Xian Xia one after another, and she didn't consume much energy. Han Yuan's sect master was pale and had no choice but to admit defeat in humiliation. "It's our turn." After Mysterious Sword, Cave Heaven, and Han Yuan sword sect, it was the mountain-breaking sword sect and Tantai clan's turn. Powentian, even if Tantai clan doesn't have a last laugh, we'll trample you under our feet. Tantai Fa looked fiercely at Powentian and the others and said coldly in his heart, "Father, let me go first." Tantai Ing, who was a 6-star Dao god, was wearing a black martial arts suit that outlined her sexy body. Her fair face was full of pockmarks, and there was an obvious scar at the corner of her eye that destroyed the beauty of her face. Tantai Ing, who was a 6-star Dao god, spoke with high fighting spirit. "All right." Tantai Fa nodded and said, "Don't show mercy. Killing is not a taboo in this contest for the Sword Palace. It would be best if we can kill 1 or 2 of them." "Don't worry, father. I know what to do." Tantai nodded. She exerted some force with her slender legs and drew a beautiful arc in the air before landing in the center of the combat arena. "Great Elder Hua, who do you want to go first?" When Powentian saw that the Tantai clan had sent out Tantai Ing, who was ranked 3rd in the Tantai clan, he turned his head to look at Great Elder Hua and the others who had a grave expression on their faces. Although Great Elder Hua was powerful, he was not confident that he could defeat Tantai Ing. Moreover, he knew that given the grudge between the Tantai clan and the mountain-breaking sword sect, this battle would be extremely fierce. "Leave it to me." Yi Qinfeng took a step forward and instantly appeared in the combat arena. He appeared in front of Tantai Ing, who had a sexy figure but a ferocious appearance. Tantai Ing frowned when she saw Yi Qinfeng, who was standing tall with his hands behind his back. Silence. Tantai Ing looked at Yi Qinfeng. She felt that he was like a cloud of fog that she could not see through. She could not tell if he was real or fake. She could not help but put up her guard. She summoned an upper transcendent sacred weapon longsword and held it in her hand. She secretly increased her attack power to the maximum and was ready to launch a thunderous attack on Yi Qinfeng. Swish! An ear-piercing sound pierced through the air. As soon as the battle began, Tantine performed the strongest attack that she had mastered. Instantly, hundreds of extremely sharp sword shadows were intertwined and swept toward Yi Chun-Feng like a meteor shower. Meteor's shadowless sword, Tantai clan's top-notch sword technique. In the face of Tantai Ying's meteor shadowless sword attack, Yi Chun-Feng did not dodge. Instead, he stood on the spot in silence. Damn, what is that guy doing? Why isn't he dodging? I think he is scared silly by Tantai clan's meteor shadowless sword and does not know what to do. Just when everyone thought that Yi Chun-Feng would be penetrated by the meteor shadowless sword and die, Yi Chun-Feng made his move. He gently waved his arm, and a force of over 500 billion Jin instantly erupted, causing the space in front of him to vibrate violently. Like a raging wave, it shattered the layers of meteor shadowless swords and blasted onto Tantai Ying's body, sending her flying. Boom! Tantai Ying fell out of the combat arena. Her broken body could not withstand the terrifying strength that surged into her body and shattered immediately. Oh my God, am I seeing things? He waved his arm gently and killed Tantai Ying, who is a 6-star Tao god. Where did this guy come from? How can his strength be so terrifying? Amazing. It turns out that this guy is a ruthless character. Looking at the scene in front of them that was completely different from what they had imagined, the experts of the major forces exclaimed. They could not believe what they had seen. Inga, seeing his daughter being killed by Yi Chun-Feng, Tantai Fa could not help but roar angrily. He could not wait to go into the combat arena and tear Yi Chun-Feng into pieces. What? You want to kill me to avenge your daughter? Looking at the angry eyes of Tantai Fa and the others, Yi Chun-Feng put his hands behind his back and said indifferently, "If you want to take revenge, you can come at me together. It will save time." "No need. I can kill you myself." Tantai Xiong, who had disappeared for hundreds of years and had broken through to the 1-star Tao ancestor realm and cultivated his body to the level of an ordinary ancestor beast, jumped onto the combat arena and said with a murderous look, "Naive." Yi Chun-Feng looked at Tantai Xiong with contempt and spat out 2 words softly. "You're courting death." Tantai Xiong's face darkened. A powerful sound wave erupted from his mouth and bombarded Yi Chun-Feng. At the moment when he sent out the powerful sound wave, he summoned a best-grade celestial saint tool, level-long sword inlaid with 7 gems. The sword carried the momentum of heaven and earth and turned into a sword of celestial saint tool more than 100 feet long. It slashed toward Yi Chun-Feng. In the face of Tantai Xiong's double attack, Yi Chun-Feng's expression did not change. He took a step forward. As he took a step forward, the middle-grade Celestial Saint Tool level combat arena trembled violently. Boom! Yi Chun-Feng punched Tantai Xiong with a shocking power. With an unparalleled power, the punch shattered the sound wave and the sword of Celestial Saint Tool. It shook Tantai Xiong back several steps. After shaking Tantai Xiong back with 1 punch, Yi Chun-Feng took a second step. All the bones in his body sounded at the same time. He punched Tantai Xiong again with a stronger power. Dong, dong, dong. The combat arena trembled violently as if a heavenly bell had appeared, constantly emitting deafening sounds. Yi Chun-Feng punched 8 times in a row. Tantai Xiong, who had no power to fight back, was forced to the edge of the combat arena. He spat out a lot of blood. The supreme-grade transcendent saint artifact in his hand could not withstand Yi Chun-Feng's 8 punches, and cracks appeared on it. The last punch. Yi Chun-Feng showed a cruel smile and punched Tantai Xiong, who was seriously injured for the 9th time. Chapter 1883. Tantai Xiong is dead. Oh my God, Tantai Xiong, who was secretly sent out by the Tantai clan to cultivate for hundreds of years, was killed by someone's fist. When did such a monster appear in the mountain-breaking sword sect? After witnessing the scene of Yi Chun-Feng killing Tantai Xiong with 9 punches, the Sky Sword Mountain was filled with gasps. Everyone was deeply shocked by Yi Chun-Feng's terrifying strength, and the way they looked at him was constantly changing. Even Bronze Sword Envoy Jian Long, and the people of the mysterious sword cave heaven were surprised by Yi Chunfeng's terrifying physical strength. He actually has such strength? Qian Bingzi, who had never taken Yi Chunfeng seriously, had a strange light in her eyes. Po Wintian, on the other hand, was pleasantly surprised, and the sullenness in his heart was swept away. Xiong'a, Tantai Fa, could not accept this fact at all. He let out a long cry and was about to rush into the arena to fight Yi Chunfeng. Family head, don't be impulsive. Yi Chunfeng is too strong. Even if you rush up, you can't avenge the young master and young lady. Several elders of the Tantai clan held Tantai Fa, who was on the verge of a mental breakdown, and tried to persuade him loudly. Tantai Fa, I'm standing right here. If you want to avenge them, then come up. When Yi Chunfeng saw Tantai Fa being hugged by several people, he placed his hand behind his back and looked at him calmly. Then, he spoke with neither joy nor sorrow. The Tantai clan admits defeat. The first elder of the Tantai clan glared angrily at Yi Chunfeng, but he had to admit defeat in the end. I originally thought that the mountain-breaking sword sect and the Hunyuan sword sect were the two weakest forces. Now it seems that the mountain-breaking sword sect is obviously a wolf in sheep's clothing. Their true strength may be even stronger than our heaven-shaking sword sect. It's useless no matter how strong the mountain-breaking sword sect is. The main character today is destined. I'm afraid no one can defeat the mysterious sword cave heaven and take the position of the sword palace. Seeing that Yi Chunfeng had forced the Tantai clan to bow their heads to him, the various forces began to quietly discuss the mountain-breaking sword sect. Even the people from the Seven Absolute Sword Palace were secretly sizing up Po Wintian and the others. Next match, Heaven-Shaking Sword Sect versus Qian family. The elder of the Chiju's Sword Palace, who was in charge of presiding over the battle for the Sword Palace, looked deeply at Yi Chunfeng as he stepped down from the arena and announced loudly. The match between the Heaven-Shaking Sword Sect and the Qian family was the most exciting of the three matches. The two forces were evenly matched in strength, and their foundations were similar as well. They fought to the last person. In the end, the number one genius of the heaven-shaking swordsmanship sect, Zhen Tianxing, who had broken through to the one-star Dao ancestor realm, defeated Qian Bingzi, the peerless goddess of the Qian family, and won the third match for the heaven-shaking swordsmanship sect. At this point, the three Sword Palace battles had ended. The mountain-breaking sword sect, the Xinjiang Grotto, and the heaven-shaking sword sect had advanced to the second round. All right, you all have a day to rest. The second round of the competition will begin tomorrow morning. The second round will be a round-robin tournament. The faction that has the last laugh will be promoted to the Sword Palace. The Seven Despair Sword Palace's first elder announced. Awesome. I've never been as happy as I am today. Even if I can't be promoted to the Sword Palace, it's still worth it. Watching Yi Chunfeng kill the two geniuses of the Tantai family, Po Wintian felt extremely satisfied. In addition, the Hunyuan sword sect had also suffered heavy casualties. As long as the mountain-breaking sword sect seized the opportunity, they would be able to suppress the other two forces. However, Yi Chunfeng, if you encounter the Xinjiang Grotto tomorrow, you must not go on a killing spree. If I'm not wrong, the Xinjiang Grotto is related to the Xinjiang Emperor. If you offend the Xinjiang Emperor, other than the Sword God, no one can save you. Po Wintian warned seriously. Don't worry, I know what I'm doing. Yi Chunfeng replied indifferently. However, he was not going to show any mercy. After all, the Sword Domain had betrayed the human race and joined the Heaven race. This made Yi Chunfeng feel ashamed. After going deep into the Sword Domain, Yi Chunfeng realized that the Sword Domain's overall strength was very strong. If the Sword Domain appeared, it might set off a bloody storm in the Void God world. It might even threaten the human race. Therefore, Yi Chunfeng was prepared to nip this threat in the bud. First Elder Ju, do you know the background of Yi Chunfeng? After seeing Yi Chunfeng kill Tantai Ying and Tantai Xiong, the bronze sword emissary revealed a shocked expression. He found Zhu Yanlong and asked in a low voice, I heard from Po Wentian that Yi Chenfeng is a guest of the mountain-breaking sword sect. Zhu Yanlong said. Guest? The bronze sword emissary said with an unfriendly expression. First, Elder Zhu, you should know the significance of this battle. There's only one main character in this battle, and that is the mysterious sword grotto. Therefore, you should warn the mountain-breaking sword sect and tell them to restrain themselves. If that Yi Chenfeng recklessly kills the descendant of the mysterious sword emperor, then you and I won't be able to bear the consequences. I understand. I will call Po Wentian over right now. Zhu Yanlong said with an ashen expression. He immediately ordered someone to call Po Wentian over to the stone hall. No one knew what they talked about, but when Po Wentian left the stone hall, his brows were tightly knitted together as if he was having an intense mental struggle. So forget it. Thinking about how terrifying the 7 Absolute Sword Palace was, Po Wentian took a deep breath. He took out a fragrant wine and found Yi Chenfeng sitting cross-legged in the snow. Honored Elder Yi, the weather is very cold. Do you want to drink my mountain-breaking sword sect's unique wine to dispel the cold? Wine. Yi Chenfeng opened his eyes that shot out a myriad of lights. He looked at Po Wentian's slightly unnatural expression and said, Okay, I'll try it. After saying that, Yi Chenfeng took the wine from Wentian. After opening it, he gulped down 2 large mouthfuls of wine. Is indeed a good wine. Yi Chenfeng revealed a thought-provoking smile as he downed the entire bottle of fragrant wine. Honored Elder Yi, rest well. I'll leave the round-robin competition to you tomorrow. After Yi Chenfeng finished the entire bottle, Po Wentian heaved a sigh of relief and left with the empty bottle. Yi Chenfeng's expression turned cold as he watched Po Wentian leave. He closed his eyes and controlled the chaos divine would to completely absorb the poison in the wine. The night passed quickly. When the first rays of the morning sun shone through the snow and onto the peak of Sky Sword Mountain, the second day's round-robin competition began. Just as Yi Chenfeng had guessed, the first match was between the mountain-breaking sword sect and the heaven-shaking sword sect. Looking at Yi Chenfeng, who represented the mountain-breaking sword sect and was the first to enter the stage, the heaven-shaking sword sect's sect master Jin Taohai, who had broken through to the 1-star Dao ancestor realm, revealed a solemn expression and said, Tianxing, this Yi Chenfeng should be the same as you, a 1-star Dao ancestor expert. You must be careful when facing him. If you can't beat him, immediately admit defeat. Don't worry, father. I will definitely cut off his head. Zhen Tianxing, who was known as the #1 expert of the younger generation of the 3 sects and 2 clans, had absolute confidence in his own strength. He leaped into the air with a quasi-ancestor-level longsword in his hand and landed in front of Yi Chenfeng. Zhen Tianxing raised his quasi-ancestor-level longsword high and pointed it at Yi Chenfeng as he said arrogantly and overbearingly, Yi Chenfeng, show me your true strength. Only then will it be interesting. Yi Chenfeng clasped his hand behind his back and directly looked down on Zhen Tianxing, who had suppressed the younger generation of the 3 sects and 2 clans, and said, You think you're not qualified to see my true strength. Is that so? I'll let you know right away whether I have this ability or not. Zhen Tianxing's eyes shot out rays of sharpness. A powerful sword intent spread out from his tall and straight body, pushing his strength to rise steadily. Chapter 1884. 2-star Dao Ancestor. This Zhen Tianxing actually concealed his strength when he fought with me. Sensing that Zhen Tianxing had the strength of a 2-star Dao Ancestor in an instant, the proud and arrogant Qian Bingzi suffered a heavy blow. Heavens, Zhen Tianxing actually concealed such a trump card. Consecrator Yi Chenfeng is probably going to lose. Great Elder Hua shook his head, no longer optimistic about Yi Chenfeng. Not only did Great Elder Hua of the mountain-breaking sword sect not think highly of Yi Chenfeng, but almost everyone present also did not think highly of Yi Chenfeng. In the progenitor realm, the difference in strength between each level was very big. It was almost impossible to defeat an enemy of a higher level. Die! Zhen Tianxing's eyes shot out rays of ominous light. He quickly stabbed the half-step ancestor longsword in his hand towards Yi Chunfeng's throat like a lightning bolt. A 2-star Dao ancestor wants to defeat me? Yi Chunfeng revealed a disdainful smile. Silence stood where he was, allowing the incomparably sharp half-step ancestor longsword to stab towards his throat. Seeing Yi Chunfeng's throat being pierced by the sword, Yi Chunfeng suddenly stretched out 2 fingers, crushed the sharp sword rays emitted by the half-step ancestor longsword, and clamped the tip of the sword. What? How is this possible? Is Yi Chunfeng's fingers an ancestral weapon? How can he clamp the tip of a half-step ancestor weapon? The silent sky Sword Mountain peak suddenly fell into chaos. The experts of various major forces continuously gasped. Elder sister, can you tell what realm Yi Chunfeng is at? Xian Xia, who had displayed her invincible might yesterday, was also disappointed by Yi Chunfeng's strength. She turned her head to look at Xian Ziwei, who had long purple hair, skin as smooth as milk, and a face that could bring calamity to countries without a single blemish. She could steal all the light around her just by standing there in silence. This Yi Chunfeng is very frightening. I don't have the confidence to defeat him. Xian Ziwei's beautiful eyes revealed a strange light as she stared at Yi Chunfeng and said in a serene voice, Elder sister, even you are not confident? Xian Xia was well aware of Xia Ziwei's strength. She was a rare genius in the Xianjin Grotto. Even the Xianjin Emperor had nothing but praise for her. With her age and strength, it would be difficult to find a match even in the Heavenly Sword Hall. Yes, haven't you realized that Yi Chunfeng isn't using any sword techniques? He's just using brute force to fight his opponent. I think it's just as he said. This heaven-shaking roar doesn't have the qualifications to make him use his full strength. Xia Ziwei nodded. Then, sister, do you think he'll ruin our plan? Xian Xia asked worriedly. Don't worry, with father here, that Yi Chunfeng is useless no matter how strong he is. My mysterious sword paradise is destined to be the 4th sword palace in the sword domain. Xian Ziwei's cold face revealed an extremely strong confidence as she spoke without hesitation. Heaven-shaking Xing, did you not eat? Why is your sword so weak? Yi Chunfeng said indifferently as he tapped his finger lightly and flicked heaven-shaking sword back. Heaven-shaking sword technique. Suppressing the shock in his heart, Heaven-shaking Xing unleashed the strongest sword technique of the heaven-shaking sword sect with all his strength and attacked Yi Chunfeng. Buzz, buzz, buzz. A series of frequently vibrating sword techniques attacked, causing the space to tremble violently. While attacking Yi Chunfeng's body, it also attacked his soul. However, Yi Chunfeng's strength was much stronger than heaven-shaking Xing's. He withstood the soul attack of heaven-shaking sword technique and rushed towards the heaven-shaking sword radiance. Relying on his strong physical body, he directly shattered the heaven-shaking sword radiance and approached the frightened heaven-shaking Xing. Where do you think you're going? Feeling the terror of Yi Chunfeng, heaven-shaking Xing wanted to dodge. However, the moment he dodged, Yi Chunfeng quickly struck out with his palm. It was like a huge mountain that ruthlessly pressed down on heaven-shaking Xing's body, directly chopping him down to the ground from midair. Heavens! What kind of monster is that Yi Chunfeng? Even with Zhen Tianxing's current strength, the heaven-shaking sword art unleashed by the half-martial ancestor longsword in his hand was actually shattered by his body alone. Is this guy really going to defy the heavens? I had to make arrangements in advance and let Po Wintian poison him. Otherwise, the plan might be disrupted because of him. Zhu Yanlong whispered. The competition is over. Give me the antidote, Bronze Sword Envoy said with flickering eyes. Sword Envoy, you want to subdue Yi Chunfeng? Zhu Yanlong asked. That's right. This Yi Chunfeng is a talent. If I can use him, I can give him an opportunity. However, if he is stubborn, then don't blame me for being ruthless. The Bronze Sword Envoy nodded his head as he said this. Tyrannical kick. After sending heaven-shaking Xing to the ground with his palm, Yi Chunfeng immediately stepped out with his tyrannical kick. It crushed the space and ruthlessly stomped on heaven-shaking Xing's body with a force of billions of genes. The terrifying power directly stomped on heaven-shaking Xing's body, causing him to howl in pain, and the sound of bones breaking resounded. Heaven-shaking. Seeing that heaven-shaking Xing was in danger, heaven-shaking Hai's eyes immediately turned red, and he shouted, "Stop! I admit defeat on behalf of heaven-shaking Xing." In the face of heaven-shaking Hai's roar, Yi Chunfeng was unmoved. He stepped out a second time. With one step, everything wailed. The terrifying power seemed to want to trample through the arena. It ruthlessly stomped on heaven-shaking Xing's body, turning him into meat paste. His incomparably hard Saint core was also crushed by the tyrannical kick. Yi Chunfeng, I just admitted defeat on behalf of heaven-shaking Xing. Why do you still want to kill him? Seeing heaven-shaking Xing being stomped into meat paste by Yi Chunfeng, heaven-shaking Hai felt his heart bleeding. He roared at Yi Chunfeng, "Is that so? But I didn't hear it." Yi Chunfeng stood in the air and looked at heaven-shaking Xing, who was roaring like an angry lion, and said plainly, "Yi Chunfeng, my heaven-shaking sword sect will not rest until you die." Heaven-shaking Xing was the heaven-shaking sword sect's greatest hope. Even if the heaven-shaking sword sect couldn't advance into a sword palace, heaven-shaking sword sect wouldn't decline for tens of thousands of years with heaven-shaking Xing around. But now, heaven-shaking sword sect's future pillar, heaven-shaking sword sect had suffered an immeasurable loss. "Won't rest until you die." Yi Chunfeng smiled and said domineeringly, "Sure, then your heaven-shaking sword sect can come at me together. Let's see who will die in the end." "You." Heaven-shaking Hai was so angry that he almost lost his mind. However, Yi Chunfeng's strength was too horrifying, causing him to be fearful. Moreover, since Yi Chunfeng dared to challenge the heaven-shaking sword sect alone, he must have some unknown means. Thinking about this, his rationality suppressed his anger. Heaven-shaking Hai Tao took a few deep breaths and held back his impulse. "Yi Chunfeng, my heaven-shaking sword sect admits defeat this time. But this enmity, my heaven-shaking sword sect will definitely take revenge. Just wait for our revenge. No need to be so troublesome. Let's wait for the Sword Palace contest to end and settle this." Yi Chunfeng said plainly, "Sect Master Zhen, I wonder if you will continue the contest?" The elders of the Qiju Sword Palace looked at heaven-shaking Hai Tao and the others and asked in a low voice, My heaven-shaking sword sect admits defeat." Hearing the threat in Yi Chunfeng's words, heaven-shaking Hai Tao and the others revealed a deep fear. However, thinking about the relationship between heaven-shaking sword sect and Qiju Sword Palace, they were slightly relieved. They were prepared to pay any price to ask Zhu Yanlong to kill Yi Chunfeng and avenge heaven-shaking Xing coward. Chapter 1885. After 2 hours of rest, we will begin the second match between the heaven-shaking sword sect and the mysterious sword paradise. After the first match, the elder of the Qiju Sword Palace looked deeply at Yi Chunfeng and announced loudly, "The heaven-shaking sword sect admits defeat." The death of Zhen Tianxing was a huge blow to Zhen Haitao. In order to take revenge on Yi Chunfeng, Zhen Haitao directly admitted defeat and allowed the mysterious sword paradise to compete with Yi Chunfeng in their best condition. Since the heaven-shaking sword sect has admitted defeat, then the final match between the mountain-breaking sword sect and mysterious sword paradise will begin in 2 hours. The winner will become the 4th sword palace of the sword domain. The elder of the Qiju Sword Palace announced loudly, "There's no need for 2 hours. I didn't use much energy just now. Let's begin now." Yi Chunfeng didn't use much strength to stomp sky-shaking Xing to death. He directly leaped on the battle stage and said, "Who else but me? Damn it. If I don't kill Yi Chunfeng, I swear I'm not human." After being humiliated by Yi Chunfeng again and again, Zhen Haitao was so angry that his lungs were about to explode. If it wasn't for Yi Chunfeng's terrifying strength, Zhen Haitao would have lost control and jumped onto the arena to fight it out with Yi Chunfeng. The elder of the Qiju Sword Palace looked deeply at Yi Chunfeng and announced loudly, "Very well. Then I announced the start of the last match. Father, sister, let me continue to be the vanguard. I want to see what he's capable of. Xianxia looked at Yi Chunfeng with high fighting spirit and said eagerly, Very well, Xia, this Yi Chunfeng is not simple. You must be careful when facing him. Remember not to be careless. The leader of the mysterious sword paradise, Xian Yi, solemnly warned. Don't worry, father. I have the amulet given to me by the ancestor. I'll be fine, Xianxia said confidently. The tip of her foot lightly touched the snowy ground. With a beautiful turn, she appeared on the arena as if she had teleported. Yi Chunfeng, you're even more outstanding than I thought. However, if you want to defeat me, you'll need to show me some real skills. Xianxia clenched her small fists at Yi Chunfeng and said aggressively, If you can take 3 of my finger attacks, I don't mind showing you my true abilities. Yi Chunfeng looked at Xianxia, who was extremely talented and had become a 1-star Dao ancestor at such a young age. Arrogant, Xianxia was also a genius. When she heard the disdain in Yi Chunfeng's words, she was infuriated. With a thought, she summoned 18 extremely sharp half-progenitor swords, which floated above her head and locked onto Yi Chunfeng. Not bad. However, a half-martial ancestor is unable to harm me. Yi Chunfeng's body was as tough as a high-grade transcendent saint artifact, and he also had 2 ancestral armors, one of which was a mid-grade ancestral artifact. No matter how strong Xianxia was, she couldn't break through his defenses. Is that so? Xianxia ground her teeth and said, I hope you'll still be so stubborn in a while. With that, Xianxia didn't wait for the match to begin. She immediately controlled the 18 half-progenitor swords and launched a fierce attack at Yi Chunfeng with ear-piercing sounds. As the 18 half-progenitor swords attacked, Yi Chunfeng gently pointed his finger. With the point of his finger, a 10,000-foot-long sword light burst out from the tip of his right index finger. It tore through the air and pointed at the 18 half-progenitor swords. Buzz, buzz, buzz. A series of ear-piercing sword cries rang out. The 18 half-progenitor swords were pushed back by Yi Chunfeng's point of his finger. You're really capable. Xianxia's expression changed slightly. She controlled the 18 half-progenitor swords and quickly merged them into a 10-foot-long sword of light, which was entwined with powerful Dao will. It slashed at Yi Chunfeng with astonishing power. As the sword slashed down, the entire space immediately went berserk. It gave people the illusion that the space was being torn apart by the giant sword. Faced with Xianxia's combined attack of 18 half-ancestor swords, Yi Chunfeng still extended a finger to meet it head-on. He tapped on the enormous sword that possessed extremely terrifying might, enough to kill an ordinary 1-star ancestor realm almighty. Ka. After withstanding Yi Chunfeng's finger sword, which contained more than 500 billion gene of force and a portion of progenitor intent, cracks immediately appeared on the giant sword. In the end, it couldn't withstand Yi Chunfeng's finger attack and exploded. Sword tornado. Xianxia didn't give up after her attacks were broken. She continued to use her ultimate move. She controlled the 18 half-progenitor swords to spin rapidly, forming an extremely powerful sword tornado. It swept Yi Chunfeng inside and began to strangle him. I told you, the half-progenitor swords can't hurt me. Just when the spectating experts thought that Yi Chunfeng would lose a layer of skin even if he didn't die, Yi Chunfeng pointed his finger again and directly tore apart the sword tornado. After breaking Xianxia's attack, he calmly walked out. How can Yi Chunfeng be so strong? Po Wentian didn't expect Yi Chunfeng to hide his strength so deeply. Instead of being surprised, he frowned and couldn't help but think of the reason for the death of the lawbreaker's sword. Bronze Sword Envoy. Can you see Yi Chunfeng's true strength? Jianlong also didn't expect Yi Chunfeng to be so strong. He couldn't help but ask Bronze Sword Envoy, whose eyes flashed. Bronze Sword Envoy slowly said, Yi Chunfeng should be at the peak of the 1-star Dao ancestor realm. However, his combat strength is terrifying. I'm afraid that he has reached the peak of the 2-star Dao ancestor realm. Moreover, He hasn't used any weapons or techniques until now. It's possible that his true combat strength is comparable to that of a 3-star Dao Ancestor realm. Jianlong gasped and said, 1-star Dao Ancestor realm and the combat strength of a 3-star Dao Ancestor realm. When did such a terrifying monster appear in our sword realm? Humph, it doesn't matter how amazing his talent is. If he doesn't submit to our heavenly sword hall, then I can only kill him. Bronze Sword Envoy, who is a 4-star Dao Ancestor, snorted. In his opinion, it was useless even if Yi Chunfeng had the ability to reach the heavens. With his strength, killing Yi Chunfeng would be a matter of minutes and seconds. Very well, take my seal. After 3 fingers, Yi Chunfeng immediately changed his move. His hands quickly twisted and quickly condensed a powerful grand palm seal between his palms. It seemed to contain the sun, the moon, and the stars. Sun, moon, and star seal. Yi Chunfeng struck out with both palms. The sun, moon, and star seal, which had fused 500 billion pounds of strength in the ancestral Tao diagram of heaven and earth, attacked Xianxia, whose expression changed greatly. Feeling the destructive power of the sun, moon, and star seal, Xianxia spat out several mouthfuls of life blood and fused it into the 18 half ancestor swords. She activated their strongest attack and used the strongest move she knew to meet the attack. Boom! When the 18 half ancestor swords, which were filled with powerful Tao will, slashed at the sun, moon, and star seal, a series of shattering sounds immediately rang out. They were unable to stop the attack of the sun, moon, and star seal. Not good. Seeing the sun, moon, and star seal easily shatter the attack of the 18 half ancestor swords, Xianxia's expression changed slightly. She used a strange footwork to dodge with all her strength. But in the instant she dodged, the sun, moon, and star seal, which was covered in cracks, exploded. The terrifying power blasted cracks in the tough space and bombarded Xianxia's body. She was unable to dodge, and she was instantly annihilated. Just as Xianxia's body was about to be torn apart by the explosive power of the sun, moon, and star seal, a piece of jade hanging from her neck shattered. It formed a powerful defensive power that enveloped Xianxia and helped her block the fatal attack. Chapter 1886. Sister, I will help you to exhaust his ancestral power. Seeing Xianxia lose to Yi Chunfeng without being able to fight back, a young man with skin even fairer than a young girl's and eyes shining like 2 black gems standing beside Xianziwei, said with an unparalleled battle intent. 2-star Dao Ancestor. That young man from Mysterious Sword Cave Heaven is a 2-star Dao Ancestor. Heavens! How could Mysterious Sword Cave Heaven have such a deep foundation? Even a random young man is an ancestral power. Feeling the battle intent and aura erupting from the young man's body, many experts from various forces were shocked. As for the Qian family, the Hunyuan sword sect, and the other forces, they were completely convinced. Xianzhou, be careful. Xianziwei nodded and said calmly. No one could guess what she was thinking. Yi Chunfeng, I will fight with you. Xianzhou took a deep breath and flew onto the arena like a sharp sword being drawn out of its sheath. 36 half-martial progenitor swords flew out of his body and circled around him. You're not my match either. Yi Chunfeng looked at Xianzhou, who was brimming with battle intent, and lightly shook his head. While Yi Chunfeng and Xianzhou were confronting each other, Zhu Yanlong immediately sent a message to Po Wentian, asking him to use a talisman to trigger the poison in Yi Chunfeng's body. Yi Chunfeng, don't blame me. Blame yourself for being too outstanding. After receiving Zhu Yanlong's message, Po Wentian took out a black talisman and spat a mouthful of blood essence into it, activating the power of the talisman and triggering the poison in Yi Chunfeng's body. However, Yi Chunfeng's poison had already been devoured by the chaotic divine wood. When the black talisman in Po Wentian's hand was burned to ashes, it did not cause any harm to Yi Chunfeng's body. How can this be? The sky absolute poison is ineffective against him. Looking at Yi Chunfeng, who was calm and did not show any signs of being poisoned, Tian opened his eyes wide in disbelief. At this time, Yi Chunfeng and Xianzhou were engaged in a fierce battle. Due to Xianzhou's frightening strength, Yi Chunfeng didn't dare to be careless. He summoned a quasi-ancestral artifact, long sword, and interweaved sharp sword rays to engage in a fierce battle. Tian, what are you waiting for? Quickly detonate the sky absolute poison in his body. Looking at Yi Chunfeng, who was getting more and more valiant as the battle progressed, completely suppressing Xianzhou and forcing him to retreat, Zhu Yanlong transmitted his voice in exasperation. Reporting to the Great Elder, I just burned a black poison talisman, but I was unable to activate the sky absolute poison in Yi Chunfeng's body. Polaris replied, not knowing what to do. If one is not enough, then two. I don't believe that he can suppress the poison in his body forever. Zhu Yanlong gritted his teeth and said, yes, yes. Tian had no choice but to take out all the black poison talismans he had. He sprayed his lifeblood and ignited them all. His strange actions attracted the attention of all the major factions, causing many people to guess what Tian's intentions were. Sect Master Tian, are you burning paper money for the Lawbreaker sword? Yi Chunfeng, who was completely suppressing Xianzhou, glanced at Tian, who was sweating profusely, and said mockingly, you. Meeting Yi Chunfeng's sharp eyes, Tian felt an indescribable panic in his heart. He had a feeling that Yi Chunfeng had already seen through his little trick and removed the poison in his body. Tian Sect Master, I advise you to save the paper money and burn it later. Perhaps there will be more people who will need you to burn paper money to help them ascend. Yi Chunfeng faintly smiled. His entire body fused with the quasi-ancestral artifact sword and slashed at Xianzhou, whose expression changed greatly as he controlled the 36 quasi-ancestral artifact swords to defend himself. The 36 quasi-ancestral artifact sword's defense was impregnable, but Yi Chunfeng's quasi-ancestral artifact sword was even more powerful. With one slash, the sword diagram formed by the 36 quasi-ancestral artifact swords was forcibly split apart. The terrifying sword aura carried with it the power to shatter mountains as it slashed at Xianzhou, who was unable to dodge in time. It shattered the amulet on his body and sent him flying out of the arena, thus losing the match. Yi Chunfeng looked at Xianzhou, who was vomiting blood and heavily falling to the ground, and said indifferently, another amulet. Your Xianjing Grotto is very rich. Without the amulet, Yi Chunfeng's sword would have been enough to kill him. Yi Chunfeng, you are really strong, but if you want to defeat my Xianjing Grotto, this bit of strength is still not enough. A trace of anger appeared on Xian Ziwei's flawless face as sharp sword rays flickered under her feet. She was like a sword goddess as she appeared on the arena under the worship of tens of thousands of swords. Jade skin, divine body constitution. Yi Chunfeng stared at the incomparably cold and elegant Xian Ziwei with a trace of surprise. He did not expect Xian Ziwei to possess the jade skin divine body, which was rarely seen in 10,000 years. Your Excellency has good eyesight. After Yi Chunfeng pointed out her constitution, Xian Ziwei's calm eyes changed slightly. To respect your Excellency, I will do my best to defeat you. No, you are also no match for me. Yi Chunfeng looked at Xian Ziwei's beautiful face and gently shook his head. Is that so? I don't think so. Xian Ziwei took a deep breath and summoned an autumn water ancestral sword that was 6 feet and 6 inches long. The sword body was engraved with water patterns, and the hilt was inlaid with a godstone. Low-grade ancestral artifact. Yi Chunfeng was quite surprised to see that Xian Ziwei, a 2-star Tao ancestor, actually possessed a low-grade ancestral artifact. It should be known that an ancestral artifact was not comparable to a half-grade ancestral artifact. Without great opportunities and great luck, it was as difficult as ascending to the heavens to obtain the recognition of an ancestral artifact. Yi Chunfeng, show me your true strength and fight with me. With that, Xian Ziwei attacked Yi Chunfeng with the autumn water ancestral sword. Whoosh! Whoosh! When she approached Yi Chunfeng, her body swayed slightly and instantly transformed into 8 beautiful figures, surrounding Yi Chunfeng in a circle. In the next moment, the 8 Xianzue attacked at the same time, interweaving sharp sword rays to attack Yi Chunfeng, trying to cut him into pieces. 8 Ultimate Black Shadow Sword Technique. What a terrifying talent. Xianzue has actually cultivated the strongest killing move created by the mysterious Sword Emperor. Seeing that Xianzue had transformed into 8 figures to attack in an instant, the major forces were completely certain that Xianzue and the others were the descendants of the mysterious Sword Emperor. Otherwise, the mysterious Sword Emperor would not have passed the 8 Ultimate Black Shadow Sword Technique, which was comparable to a supreme superpower to Xianzue. Yi Chunfeng did not panic when facing the attacks of the 8 Xianzue figures at the same time. He gently waved his arm and mobilized the powerful spatial energy to form a terrifying spatial storm above his head, slowing down the attack speed of the 8 Ultimate Black Shadow Sword Technique and tearing open cracks. When the 8 Ultimate Black Shadow Sword Technique's power did not decrease and cut through the spatial storm, Yi Chunfeng, who was extremely fast, had already disappeared, causing Xianzue's attack to miss. 5th Level Spatial Law Transformation Spatial Storm. Where did this Yi Chunfeng come from? Seeing that Yi Chunfeng not only had amazing combat strength, but also cultivated the illusory spatial law to the 5th level, many people had a strong curiosity about Yi Chunfeng's identity. The Copper Sword Envoy's eyes burned with passion. He had a strong interest in the spatial law that Yi Chunfeng had grasped. Not bad, not bad. Xianzue, you are more outstanding than I imagined. Chapter 1887. Ancestral Artifact. Yi Chunfeng also has an ancestral artifact. Seeing the demon sealing sword spitting out sword lights that cut through space, the experts from the various factions were so shocked that their eyeballs almost popped out. Regardless of the outcome of the match, we must capture Yi Chunfeng. We must not let him leave. Bronze Sword Envoy did not expect Yi Chunfeng to have so many secrets. Not only did he cultivate the spatial law to the 5th level, but he also had the extremely precious ancestral sword. All right, I will order people to set up a large array at the peak of the sky Sword Mountain and seal this place. Zhu Yanlong nodded and called over several experts from the Qijue Sword Palace. He gave them a large number of array cornerstones and ordered them to set up an inescapable net around the peak of the sky Sword Mountain. Yi Chunfeng, although you are powerful, it won't be easy for you to defeat me. Xianzue's beautiful eyes shone with sharpness. With a thought, a sacred sword soul flew out of her sea of soul. A sacred sword soul. That beauty has actually cultivated a sacred sword soul. It seems like Yi Chunfeng is powerless to reverse the situation. Yeah, that beauty is already very powerful. Now that she has summoned a sacred sword soul, Yi Chunfeng will definitely lose. Looking at the sacred sword soul hovering above Xianzue's head, almost no one was optimistic about Yi Chunfeng's chances. However, Powentian, who was in a daze, felt his heart beat wildly. This was because he clearly remembered that Yi Chunfeng had condensed an even more terrifying ancestral sword soul. Is this your trump card? It doesn't seem like much. Looking at the Saint-grade sword soul that was emitting a piercing red light, Yi Chunfeng smiled disdainfully. All right, this match can end now. I'll let you see my trump card. As he spoke, an unparalleled black light flew out of Yi Chunfeng's sea of soul and hovered above his head. Black. That is an ancestral sword soul. Heavens, what kind of monster is this Yi Chunfeng? Not only is his physical body invincible, but he has also condensed an ancestor-grade sword soul. How can he let others live? Horrifying. This is too horrifying. Maybe Yi Chunfeng will have a last laugh. He will be able to suppress the mysterious sword Cave Heaven all by himself and win the final victory for the mountain-breaking sword sect. The experts of the various major forces were stunned by Yi Chunfeng's strength. Even the proud and arrogant Xianzue, who rarely put anyone in her eyes, showed a trace of absent-mindedness. This was because she was very clear about the difficulty of condensing an ancestral sword soul. Even with her talent and resources, she was not completely confident that she could condense her sword soul to the ancestral realm. However, not only had Yi Qinfeng done it, he had also raised his ancestral sword soul to a very high level. Am I really not as good as him? Xian Ziwei felt a strong sense of defeat. What tricks do you have? Use them all. Otherwise, I'm afraid you won't have a chance. Yi Qinfeng controlled the ancestor-grade sword soul and fused it into the demon's sealing sword, activating all the ancestral inscriptions in the demon's sealing sword. He raised the demon's sealing sword high and pointed it at the solemn-looking Xian Ziwei. Yi Qinfeng, you are really powerful. However, it won't be that easy to defeat me. Xian Ziwei took a deep breath and removed all distracting thoughts from her mind. She used the mystic skill of the mysterious sword cave heaven that had been passed down for countless years. She burned her powerful bloodline power and forcibly raised her strength to the level of a 3-star Dao ancestor. With her strength soaring, Xian Ziwei did not hesitate. She held the autumn water ancestral sword and stabbed out streaks of sword light that looked down on the world. They were like endless sword waves that surged and swept towards Yi Qinfeng. Slash! The sword waves that tore through space attacked. Yi Qinfeng did not use a powerful sword move. Instead, he held the demon's sealing sword and slashed down in the void. He slashed out with the sword and killed without mercy. The terrifying sword light was like a crescent moon that ruthlessly slashed at the oncoming sword waves. He relied on his absolute attack to break Xian Ziwei's attack. In the next moment, Yi Qinfeng stabbed at Xian Ziwei's towering chest with his sword. This stare was extremely slow in the eyes of the onlookers. However, in the eyes of Xian Ziwei, Copper Sword Envoy, and Absolute Flame Dragon, it was a different scene. In the blink of an eye, Yi Qinfeng's slow stab appeared at Xian Ziwei's chest. The terrifying sword light cut through all obstacles and directly tore Xian Ziwei's clothes and her inner armor, revealing a dazzling snow-white skin. If Xian Ziwei had not been so sharp and had not sensed danger and dodged early, this stab would have pierced through her chest. Seeing that Yi Qinfeng had cut open her clothes, revealing bits of her body, Xian Ziwei's body immediately shone with boundless sword light that enveloped her entire body. 2 intoxicating blushes appeared on her exquisite face. She looked at Yi Qinfeng with anger and annoyance. What? This is a battle of life and death. You still care about these things? Yi Qinfeng ignored Xian Ziwei's angry gaze and said, You should know that if you lose, you will lose your life. Yi Qinfeng, don't be so arrogant. It won't be that easy to defeat me. Xian Ziwei was so angry that her teeth itched. She activated the power of her saint-level sword soul and continuously used her strongest killing moves to attack Yi Qinfeng. Facing Yi Qinfeng, who was the strongest opponent she had ever met since her debut, Xian Ziwei's entire body's potential was stimulated. The power of her killing moves kept increasing. In addition, she used a secret technique to temporarily possess the power of a 3-star Dao ancestor. The entire arena became a sea of swords, surging violently. In the sea of swords, Yi Qinfeng did not panic. He was like an unshakable reef. No matter how the sea of swords attacked, it could not hurt him at all. How can Yi Qinfeng be so strong? Is he really only a 1-star Dao ancestor? It could be said that Yi Qinfeng's various techniques were beyond everyone's imagination. They could not believe what was happening in front of them. Father, do you think sister can win? Although Xian Xia blindly worshipped Xian Ziwei, after seeing Yi Qinfeng's amazing techniques, her confidence in Xian Ziwei's strength was constantly crumbling. It will be difficult. It will be very difficult. Xian Yi sighed softly. He had not expected this to happen today. Father, can you defeat Yi Qinfeng? Xian Xia gently bit her wet lips and asked somewhat unwillingly. Ziwei and I are on par. If Ziwei cannot defeat Yi Qinfeng, it will be very difficult for me to defeat him. Xian Yi shook his head. Then what should we do? Are we just going to give up the position of Sword Palace to the mountain-breaking sword sect? Xian Xia was unwilling to accept this. The mountain-breaking sword sect. Xian glanced from afar at Wen Tian, who was like an ant on a hot pan. I really want to know how this will end today. One sword godless. Just as Xian Ziwei was unleashing her full power at all costs, Yi Qinfeng unleashed his ultimate killing move. The life-death ancestral Dao diagrams and the five elements ancestral Dao diagrams shot out of his body and merged with the demon sealing sword. With one stab, all the light in the entire space was stolen by the godless sword. The light instantly dimmed. It was as if this unparalleled divine sword was the only thing left in the world. Chi, chi, chi. Under the onslaught of one sword godless, Xian Ziwei's sea of swords was constantly shattered. The astonishing speed made it impossible for her to dodge. She could only watch in a daze as the divine sword pierced her body. She watched as Yi Chunfeng's soulless sword pierced through her body and killed her. The amulet around her neck shattered, blocking most of soulless sword's attack for her. However, she was still shaken by the powerful aftershock and fell to the edge of the arena. Large amounts of blood sprayed out of her mouth, dyeing her beautiful face red. Xian Ziwei, you have lost. Chapter 1888. Young Master Yi, please show mercy. Don't take my daughter's life. Xuani knew that Yi Chunfeng was a vicious and merciless person. He definitely wouldn't show mercy to Xian Ziwei because of her beauty, so he immediately shouted. However, Yi Chunfeng was unmoved. He continued to point the demon sealing sword at Xian Ziwei's throat. Because the demon sealing sword was too sharp, a gash appeared on Xian Ziwei's neck. A large amount of blood flowed out. Yi Chunfeng, what are you doing? I order you to put down your sword immediately. If you dare to hurt Xian Ziwei, I swear I'll wipe out your entire family. The burly bronze sword envoy's face sank. He used the tone of a superior and loudly ordered. Yi Chunfeng ignored bronze sword envoy's warning. He stared sharply at Xian Ziwei's pale face and considered whether or not to kill her. Xian Ziwei bit her lips and stared at Yi Chunfeng's arrogant face. She stubbornly said, Yi Chunfeng, I've lost. However, if you want me to beg for mercy, you better give up. Even if I die, I won't bow my head to you. Sai, forget it. Yi Chunfeng did not expect Xian Ziwei to be so unyielding. When he thought about her relationship with the mysterious Sword King, Yi Chunfeng put away the demon sealing sword and did not take her life. Yi Chunfeng looked at Xian Yi, who had let out a sigh of relief, and asked domineeringly, Is your mysterious sword grotto heaven still going to fight? Yi Chunfeng, I don't know where you came from, but so what if you beat everyone? Ask Po Wen Tian if he dares to promote the mountain-breaking sword sect to his sword palace. Bronze Sword Envoy stared coldly at Yi Chunfeng and said, However, I see that your cultivation is not bad. If you are willing to submit to me, I can consider granting you an opportunity. Haha, you think you're worthy? Yi Chunfeng laughed. He did not think much of Bronze Sword Envoy at all. Yi Chunfeng, do you still not understand the situation you're in? Do you know the consequences of refusing? Copper Sword Emissary's face gradually darkened as he threatened. Situation? Are you saying that the peak of Sky Sword Mountain is enveloped by an array formation? Yi Chunfeng said fearlessly. What? You found out? Zhu Yanlong walked over and asked with a frown. You want to deceive the world with such a lowly method? You guys are a little naive. Yi Chunfeng smiled and said disdainfully. He was not worried about his situation at all. Fine. Yi Chunfeng, I'd like to see if you can still be so arrogant after I capture you. The short-tempered bronze sword user was infuriated. He roared furiously, then summoned a rusty iron sword and hacked towards Yi Chunfeng. Copper Sword Emissary was a 4-star Dao ancestor. His full power attack was extremely powerful. The terrifying sword light was like a waterfall that cut through space. The terrifying power made everyone present feel fear. Yi Chunfeng is too arrogant. He really thinks that he is invincible after defeating Xian Ziwei. Copper Sword Emissary is a 4-star Dao ancestor. His strength is unfathomable. He is not someone he can fight against. Yes, this time he will suffer. I think that if he does not surrender, he will most likely be killed by Copper Sword Emissary. The scene of Yi Chunfeng defeating Xian Ziwei was shocking. However, Xianziwei was only a 2-star Dao ancestor. There was an insurmountable gap between her and Copper Sword Emissary, who was a 4-star Dao ancestor. It could be said that Copper Sword Emissary only needed one move to defeat Xianziwei. Primordial Bloodline, burn. Copper Sword Emissary slashed with his sword. Yi Chenfeng did not hold back. He quickly burned the powerful Primordial Bloodline, instantly increasing his strength to the peak of the 2-star Dao ancestor level. Then he merged with the God Blood Bead, increasing his strength to the 3-star Dao ancestor level. His physical strength also increased exponentially. In the end, it skyrocketed to 15,000 million gene of strength. Boom! Yi Chenfeng raised the Demon Sealing Sword, which had merged with an ancestor-level sword soul and clashed with Copper Sword Emissary's invincible sword. Just as everyone thought that Yi Chenfeng would be severely injured, even if he did not die, the scene in front of them was beyond their expectations. They widened their eyes and were almost stunned. After the collision, Copper Sword Emissary's Skyfall sword light was continuously shattered. The Demon Sealing Sword, which was filled with 15,000 million gene of strength, crashed heavily into Copper Sword Emissary's rusty longsword. The sudden explosion of power shook Copper Sword Emissary, causing him to lose control of his body. Blood flowed from his perlicue as his entire body was sent flying. My God, am I seeing things? Copper Sword Emissary, a 4-star Dao ancestor, is not his match? Was he hiding his strength in the previous few battles? The eyes of the experts from the various major powers nearly fell out of their sockets. Xianziwei, who had been defeated by Yi Chenfeng, was even more shocked. She did not expect that after using all her strength and using her strongest technique, she would still be unable to force Yi Chenfeng to use his true strength. How can he be so strong? How did he cultivate? Xianziwei stared at Yi Chenfeng. While she felt frustrated, she also developed a strong interest in Yi Chenfeng. Copper Sword Emissary, show me your true strength. After forcing Copper Sword Emissary back with one sword strike, Yi Chenfeng revealed an arrogant look. He raised the Demon Sealing Sword high and pointed it at Copper Sword Emissary. Good. Yi Chenfeng, I have underestimated you. Copper Sword Emissary's eyes shone with a terrifying light as he said, I will let you know the consequences of angering me. As he spoke, Copper Sword Emissary unlocked a powerful seal in his body. A thick sword intent burst out from his strong body, instantly increasing his strength to the peak of the 4-star Dao ancestor level. He posed a great threat to Yi Chenfeng. Go to hell. Copper Sword Emissary roared. He held his rusty ancestral artifact, longsword, and launched a fierce attack at Yi Chenfeng. The tide-like attacks were like a storm, tearing the entire space apart. Infinite chaos. Copper Sword Emissary attacked in anger. Yi Chenfeng immediately used the supreme magic that he had created. He slashed out with his sword. The towering shadow of the chaotic divine tree, which emitted the light of the chaotic 5 elements, broke out of his body. It turned into an endless amount of chaotic power and merged into the Demon Sealing Sword. It messed up the entire space and tore apart Copper Sword Emissary's continuous attacks. It was like a meteor crashing into Earth. It collided with Copper Sword Emissary in midair. Boom! There was an earth-shattering explosion at the peak of Sky Sword Mountain. The terrifying power destroyed the entire space, piercing a huge hole in the thick clouds and illuminating a rare bright sun. Although Yi Chenfeng's infinite chaos was powerful, Copper Sword Emissary had the strength of a peak 4-star Dao ancestor. He was evenly matched with Copper Sword Emissary. Copper Sword Emissary suppressed the roiling blood in his body and continued to attack Yi Chenfeng with his killing move. Suddenly, Yi Chenfeng's forehead cracked open, revealing the ferocious eye of the ancestral dragon. When the eye of the ancestral dragon opened, thousands of rays of light shot out like billions of stars. They attacked Copper Sword Emissary, whose expression changed drastically. They directly pierced through his killing move, tore through his body's defenses, and sent him flying. Copper Sword Emissary, Let me send you to hell. After using the eye of the ancestral dragon to severely injure Copper Sword Emissary, Yi Chenfeng immediately summoned the supreme-grade ancestral artifact, the Death Scythe. He used the way of equipment control to increase the attack power of the Death Scythe to the maximum and threw it out with all his strength. No! Copper Sword Emissary saw tens of thousands of ancestral glyphs light up at the same time. The Death Scythe was filled with destructive power, and it was getting closer and closer. Unable to dodge, he used his rusty sword to attack with all his strength. However, the rusty sword in his hand was only a low-grade ancestral artifact. It could not block the most powerful Death Scythe. Crack! The rusty iron sword was cut in half by the Death Scythe. The Death Scythe's power did not decrease at all. Under the horrified gaze of the bronze sword emissary, it cut open his strong body and crushed his powerful soul, killing him on the spot. Chapter 1889. Gu, Bronze Sword Emissary, is dead. He was killed by Yi Chenfeng. After witnessing the scene of Bronze Sword Emissary being killed by the Death Scythe, everyone was dumbfounded. They looked at Yi Chenfeng with fear in their eyes. Grand Elder, what should we do? Although the Qijue Sword Palace was the head of the 3 great sword palaces in the sword domain, only Palace Master Zhu Wuqing could suppress Bronze Sword Emissary. Even Zhu Yanlong was slightly weaker than Bronze Sword Emissary. But now, the strongest Bronze Sword Emissary had been mercilessly killed by Yi Chenfeng, causing everyone in the Qijue Sword Palace to be at a loss. Roar! The death of Bronze Sword Emissary had completely enraged the 3-star demon ancestor bloodthirsty fiend wolf. It angrily roared as its eyes shot out a thick bloody light. It opened its mouth full of fangs and crazily attacked Yi Chenfeng. The bloodthirsty fiend wolf's attack was activated. Yi Chenfeng, who had endless ancestral power, did not dodge. He punched out with the force of a trillion gene, instantly exploding and bombarding the bloodthirsty fiend wolf's body. With one punch, the bloodthirsty fiend wolf was sent flying. Sounds of bones breaking could be heard from its huge body. Roar! Just as the heavily injured bloodthirsty fiend wolf continued to attack without any regard for its life, the eye of the ancestral dragon on Yi Chenfeng's forehead continued to shoot out rays of killing light. They directly pierced through the bloodthirsty fiend wolf's heavily injured body, riddling it with holes. It fell onto the thick snow, dyeing a large patch of snow red as it breathed its last breath. A 3-star demon ancestor bloodthirsty fiend wolf was killed just like that. What level of treasure is that vertical eye on his forehead? How can it be so powerful? Seeing Yi Chenfeng killing the bloodthirsty fiend wolf so effortlessly, the experts from the 3 sects and 2 clans were trembling in fear. As for the sect master of the heaven-shaking sword sect, Zhen Taohai, who had threatened to fight Yi Chenfeng to the death, was so scared that his face turned pale. He wanted to find a place to hide so that Yi Chenfeng would not find him. Set up the 7-sword formation. The strength that Yi Chenfeng displayed was extremely horrifying. However, it did not frighten Zhu Yanlong. Zhu Yanlong quickly summoned an extremely powerful formation diagram that flickered with the Big Dipper. Then, he set up the 7 absolute sword formation with 7 ancestor realm experts. 7-sword formation. Looking at Zhu Yanlong and the others who had fused with the formation map and stood in the shape of the Big Dipper, Yi Chenfeng's delicate face did not reveal a trace of panic. Since you're looking for death, I'll fulfill your wish. With that, Yi Chenfeng took a step forward and summoned the soaring immortal sword. With a powerful sword might, he charged at the heptagon sword formation. 7-Ju sword slash. As Yi Chenfeng closed in, Zhu Yanlong, who was in charge of controlling the center of the formation, immediately mobilized the power of the entire 7 absolute sword formation and slashed towards Yi Chenfeng. Not only did this sword fuse the power of the array diagram, but it also fused the power of 7 great ancestor realm experts. The sword power virtually reached the full power strike of a 5-star Dao ancestor. 100 layers of space restriction. As the heptagon sword attacked, Yi Chenfeng immediately mobilized the powerful power of space and formed 100 layers of restrictions in front of him to block the attack of the heptagon sword. Chi, chi, chi. When the heptagon sword, which was astonishingly powerful, slashed the layers of the 100 layers of space restriction, it constantly shattered the layers of restrictions. However, when the heptagon sword formation broke the 100 layers of space restriction, Yi Chunfeng's figure was long gone, causing the attack of the heptagon sword formation to miss. Zhu Yanlong, don't look for me. I'm here. Yi Chunfeng's cold voice appeared behind the heptagon sword formation. Heptagon sword slash again. Zhu Yanlong's face darkened as he continuously activated the attack power of the heptagon sword formation. He slashed out waves of extremely powerful sword light to attack Yi Chunfeng. However, Yi Chunfeng's movement speed was too fast. The powerful sword light that tore through space could not hurt him at all. As for Zhu Yanlong and the others who were continuously attacking, they consumed a lot of energy. Sigh, I didn't expect such an unforeseen event to happen in the battle for the Sword Palace. Looking at Yi Chunfeng, who was like a ghost, constantly moving in mid-air to dodge the attacks of the heptagon sword formation, the leader of the Xianjian Cave Heaven, Xian Yi, sighed softly. Father, who do you think will have the last laugh? Xian Ziwei, whose confidence had been greatly damaged, gently bit her alluring red lips and asked in a low voice. Although I want the heptagon sword palace to win, from the current situation, Yi Chunfeng has a higher chance of winning. Moreover, I have a feeling that Yi Chunfeng still has a trump card that he hasn't used yet. Xian Yi shook his head and said, It can't be, father. Yi Chunfeng is already very powerful. Don't tell me he's still hiding his strength. Xian Xia said in disbelief. Xia, you know that Yi Chunfeng is not only facing the heptagon sword palace. He killed Bronze Sword Envoy in front of everyone, which is equivalent to offending the Heavenly Sword Hall. If he doesn't have absolute strength, he wouldn't dare to do so. Xian Yi said, Sai, this guy is really a monster. However, he is quite compatible with my sister. Xian Xia sighed softly. Little girl, what nonsense are you talking about? Xian Ziwei's face darkened, but two intoxicating red spots appeared on her white and tender earlobes. Challenging the Heavenly Sword Hall? Is this guy really that bold? Thinking about how she had just ridiculed Yi Chunfeng for overestimating himself, but now it seemed that her ridicule was so ignorant, the peerless goddess of the Qian family, Qian Bingzi, smiled bitterly. Time passed by minute. Yi Chunfeng used his sword steps and constantly moved around in the shattered space, dodging the attacks of the heptagon sword formation. As the battle was too intense, it affected most of the space on the peak of the Sky Sword Mountain, scaring the experts of the major factions to the edge of the Sky Sword Mountain. If the peak of the Sky Sword Mountain hadn't been sealed by the people of the Heptagon Sword Palace, the experts of the major factions would have long fled this place. After attacking for so long, I think you guys should be tired. Now it's my turn to attack. The powerful God-Eater brain could sense that Zhu Yanlong and the others were exhausted, and the power of the heptagon sword formation was decreasing. Yi Chunfeng stopped dodging and summoned the upper-grade ancestral artifact, the Life and Death Plate, to attack the heptagon sword formation. F***CK, another ancestral artifact. Could it be that Yi Chunfeng inherited the legacy of an old sword god? Feeling the invincible ancestral aura from the Life and Death Plate, the experts of the major factions who were hiding in the distance were shocked again. Rumble. The Life and Death Plate shook, and the terrifying life and death force passed through the heptagon sword diagram and attacked Zhu Yanlong and the others. When Zhu Yanlong forcibly mobilized the heptagon sword formation to attack the Life and Death Plate, Yi Chunfeng's entire body merged with the flying fairy sword and stabbed forward with the soulless sword. As the sword stabbed out, the four ancestral Dao diagrams gushed out from his body. When he merged with the four ancestral Dao diagrams, the soulless sword's attack power instantly soared to the extreme. The sword slashed through the heptagon sword diagram's defense and stabbed a heptagon sword palace's ancestral artifact expert who couldn't dodge in time. Bang! After being attacked by Yi Chunfeng's soulless sword, The Heptagon Sword Palace's ancestral artifact expert's body was immediately pierced through, turning into a cloud of blood mist and dying on the spot. After killing one person, the Heptagon sword formation was instantly broken. At this time, Yi Chunfeng raised the power of the four ancestral Dao intense to the extreme and struck out the 3,000 transformation God Fist, bombarding Zhu Yanlong and the others at close range. Although Zhu Yanlong controlled the Heptagon sword diagram to defend with all his might, two ancestral artifact experts were still killed by the 3,000 transformation God Fist. Chapter 1890. Four ancestral Dao diagrams destroyed the 7 extinction sword formation and destroyed the 3 Dao ancestors of the 7 extinction sword palace. Is this guy really human? The scene before their eyes caused everyone to stiffen in place. Their minds went blank, and they were dumbfounded. 7 extinction sword strike. The death of the 3 Dao ancestors of the 7 extinction sword palace completely enraged Jianlong. He burned his powerful bloodline power at all costs and launched a killing move at Yi Chunfeng at close range. Ancestral Dragon's Eye. Jianlong transformed into endless sword light and attacked. The ancestral dragon's eye on Yi Chunfeng's forehead immediately shot out endless light, penetrating Jianlong's 7 extinction sword strike and forcibly forcing him back. Swish, swish, swish. When Yi Chunfeng used the ancestral dragons, I'd have forcibly forced Jianlong back. The 3-7 extinction sword palace ancestral realm experts who were lucky enough to escape attacked Yi Chunfeng at the same time. As they were too close to each other, and the speed of their furious attacks was extremely fast, Yi Chunfeng was unable to dodge and was pierced by the 3 incomparably sharp low-grade ancestral swords. Mid-grade ancestral artifact. Just as the onlookers were guessing that Yi Chunfeng's body would be pierced by the 3 low-grade ancestral swords, they were horrified to discover that Yi Chunfeng's body had an extremely strong defensive power, engraved with a large number of profound dragon patterns, and inlaid with 2 ferocious dragon heads on the shoulders, had appeared on the surface of Yi Chunfeng's body. And the scene of the dragon armor easily blocking the attacks of the 3 low-grade ancestral swords, the onlookers guessed that Yi Chunfeng's ancestral armor was most likely a mid-grade ancestral armor. In the entire sword domain, there were no more than 3 people who possessed a mid-grade ancestral armor. Who are you? Jianlong's heart trembled when he saw that Yi Chunfeng even had a mid-grade ancestral armor. Although he was powerful, and his attack power was even more impressive, Yi Chunfeng's combat power was too terrifying, and coupled with the mid-grade ancestral armor's defense, it would be extremely difficult to kill him. What you should be thinking about now is not my identity, but whether or not you can survive. Yi Chunfeng sneered. He sped up the flow of time by 10 times and increased his attack speed to the limit. He ferociously attacked Zhu Yanlong and the other 3. Disciples of the Qiju's Sword Palace, disciples of the mysterious Sword Grotto, disciples of the 3 sects and 2 clans, heed my command. Quickly follow me to kill the enemy. Yi Chunfeng's attacks were too ferocious, and his defense was beyond imagination. Helpless, Zhu Yanlong ordered loudly, preparing to gather everyone's strength to kill Yi Chunfeng. Father, should we make a move? The hesitant Xian Xia looked at the gloomy Xian Yi when she heard the absolute flame dragon's roar. Don't attack. Before Xian Yi could speak, Xian Ziwei spoke. This, if we don't do anything, will Great Elder Zhu blame us? Xian Xia said worriedly. Zhu Yanlong doesn't dare to offend us. Moreover, Yi Chunfeng must have some trump cards that he hasn't used yet. I think he will have the last laugh. Xian Ziwei said. That's right. I agree with Ziwei's suggestion. We choose to stand aside and not attack. Xian Yi nodded. The mysterious Sword Grotto ignored Zhu Yanlong's order, but the experts of the 3 sects and 2 clans didn't dare to disobey. The experts of the heaven-shaking swordsmanship sect, who had a grudge against Yi Chunfeng, rushed out first and surrounded Yi Chunfeng. They interweaved tens of thousands of sword lights and attacked his body continuously. Father, don't be impulsive. This Yi Chunfeng isn't someone we can offend. Our Qin family can't get involved. Just as the Qin family was about to join forces with the other forces to besiege Yi Chunfeng, Qin Bingzi grabbed the arm of her father, the head of the Qin family, and said loudly, "Bingzi, do you think Yi Chunfeng will win?" The head of the Qin family, Qian Tong, frowned slightly. "Father, believe me, Yi Chunfeng isn't someone the Seven Sword Palace can deal with. Even if we help, it won't be of much use. It might even cause our Qin family to be annihilated." Qian Bingzi bit her lips and said, "But, father, let's make a bet. If we win, this will be the opportunity for our Qin family to rise." Qian Bingzi said, "But if we lose, there will be no place for our Qin family in the Sword Realm." Qian Tong said with a worried face, "Lose? Father, do you think Yi Chunfeng will lose?" Qian Bingzi glanced at Yi Chunfeng, who looked like a celestial being, and said, "All right, our Qin family will make a bet." Qian Tong found that the mysterious sword grotto didn't interfere. He gritted his teeth and made a difficult decision. "Since you want to die, I will fulfill your wish. Primitive Tao fetus, fiend god, torch dragon, peacock king, chaos divine beast, come out." Although Yi Chunfeng's strength was shocking, and he was wearing a mid-grade ancestral artifact, the dragon armor, he still couldn't handle the combined attacks of the major forces. With a thought, he summoned many helpers. As for the divine Dao Su, the pinnacle evil ancestor, and other helpers, he continued to hide. This was because if the Heavenly Sword Palace knew that he had a pinnacle ancestor protecting him, they might inform the heavenly race and cause a series of unnecessary troubles. When the fiend god Torch Dragon and the others appeared, they immediately unleashed their strongest attacks and tore apart the line of defense of the major forces. The fiend god Torch Dragon was a 3-star Dao ancestor, and the primitive Tao fetus combat strength had reached 4-star. In addition to the Peacock King, the Chaos Divine Beast strength surpassed the experts of the 3 sects and 2 clans. Soon, the casualties of the experts of the 3 sects and 2 clans began to increase. In the chaotic space, clouds of blood mist were constantly erupting, dyeing the sacred peak of the sky Sword Mountain blood red. Yuetiu. When Po Wentian saw the primitive Tao fetus, he immediately recognized that it was the person who destroyed the ancestral vein and killed the Law of Vanquishing sword. Boom! Just as his heart was trembling, the primitive Tao fetus threw a punch at him. The fist radiance that shattered the void directly blasted his body, killing him with a single punch. Phew, Bingzi, fortunately, I listened to your decision just now. Otherwise, my Qin family would really be finished. Seeing the scene before him, Qian Tong let out a long sigh of relief and said with lingering fear, "This Yi Chunfeng hid too deeply. I really want to know who he is." Qian Bingzi was also attracted by Yi Chunfeng's martial prowess and methods. Her beautiful big eyes revealed an expression that was getting brighter and brighter. 7 absolutes break all laws. Looking at the situation that was completely out of control, Zhu Yanlong didn't retreat. He constantly spat out mouthfuls of blood essence and stimulated his own potential. He used the powerful killer moves of the 7 Absolutes Sword Palace to attack Yi Chunfeng. However, under Yi Chunfeng's control of the life and death plate, Zhu Yanlong's killer moves were constantly crushed by the life and death plate. Life and death plate decide life and death. Yi Chunfeng had endless ancestral power. He continuously injected ancestral power into the life and death plate, controlling it to constantly expand and release an endless black and white light of life and death to attack the surroundings. Ah! Shrill screams rang out one after another. Several experts of the 7 Absolutes Sword Palace who couldn't dodge in time were hit by the light of life and death released by the life and death plate. The vitality in their bodies was instantly destroyed. They fell onto the blood-stained, snowy ground and died. Quickly open the seal. Seeing the experts of the 7 Absolutes Sword Palace dying one after another, Zhu Yanlong's psychological defense had completely collapsed. He was flustered and exasperated as he ordered, "Want to escape? It's too late." Yi Chunfeng sneered. He summoned the dragon-head ancestral bow and killed the experts of the Seven Absolutes Sword Palace who wanted to open the seal. Another ancestral artifact. Chapter 1891. Yi Chen-feng, even if I become a ghost, I will not let you go. Since his escape route was sealed, Zhu Yanlong knew that he could only fight with his life. He performed the secret skill of Qijue's Sword Palace and burned his own life force to increase his strength. For a short period of time, he had the battle prowess of a 5-star Dao ancestor. Life God Art. Yi Chen-feng didn't expect Zhu Yanlong to know a life God art that was similar to the life spirit spell. He sensed a strong sense of danger from Zhu Yanlong's body. However, even though Zhu Yanlong's battle prowess had skyrocketed to the extreme and posed a great threat to Yi Chen-feng, he had almost sacrificed all of his life force. No matter the result, he would die for sure. Die with art. Zhu Yanlong roared furiously. He held a low-grade ancestral sword and slashed towards Yi Chen-feng. He wanted to use his powerful life force to kill Yi Chen-feng. At this critical moment, the primitive embryo of Dao suddenly stood in front of Yi Chen-feng and blocked Zhu Yanlong's fatal attack with its indestructible body. This is the primitive embryo of Dao. Zhu Yanlong's eyesight was much better than Pointian's. Sensing the ancestral power from the primitive embryo of Dao, Zhu Yanlong immediately guessed its origin. That's right. Yi Chen-feng nodded and handed over the scythe of death to him. Primitive embryo of Dao, kill him with me. Yes. The primitive embryo of Dao nodded and slashed towards Zhu Yanlong with the scythe of death. After performing the life god art, Zhu Yanlong's battle prowess skyrocketed and was comparable to a 5-star Dao ancestor. However, the primitive embryo of Dao was not much weaker than him. In addition, the Scythe of Death was a supreme-grade ancestral weapon. In the hands of the primitive embryo of Dao, half of its power could be unleashed. This posed a great threat and trouble to Zhu Yanlong. Yi Chen-feng, if you have the guts, fight me fair and square. Being attacked by the original embryo of Dao in a row, Zhu Yanlong felt that his blood was boiling inside his body. He roared like an angry lion. Are you an idiot? Why should I fight you fair and square? Yi Chen-feng was speechless. Why don't you just stretch out your neck and let me cut you? You what? Yi Chen-feng continued to mock. You are stronger than me, you are older than me, and you are using your life god art to fight me. What else do you want? Are you invincible just because you're thick-skinned? Brad, I will kill you. Zhu Yanlong didn't expect Yi Chen-feng's mouth to be so poisonous. He was so angry that his whole body trembled. The flames in his eyes seemed to want to melt Yi Chen-feng. Kill me? Maybe in your next life. As he spoke, the ferocious ancestral dragon's eye on Yi Chen-feng's forehead continuously shot out rays of light, attacking the absolute flame dragon. Under the attacks of the two extreme ancestral auras, the absolute flame dragon's attacks were greatly affected. He couldn't pose a threat to Yi Chen-feng at all. Meanwhile, under the crazy attacks of the Fiend God Candle Dragon, the Chaos Divine Beast, and the Peacock King, the 3 sects and 1 family suffered heavy casualties. The 7 Sword Palace's warriors were all slaughtered and turned into minced meat. No, don't kill us. We know we are wrong. Please spare us. Looking at the minced bodies on the ground, and the Fiend God Candle Dragon, and the other Fiend God Candle Dragon, the warriors of the 3 sects and 1 family had their psychological defense completely collapsed. They fled in panic while begging for mercy. Don't show any mercy. Kill them all. Yi Chen-feng showed no mercy to his enemies. He ordered the Fiend God Candle Dragon and the others to kill mercilessly. Yi Chen-feng, you will not have a good ending. Zhun Taohai, whose left arm had been chopped off and his body was covered in bloody wounds, let out a desperate roar. He rushed towards Yi Chen-feng with a surge of blood qi. He wanted to self-destruct his saint spirit to deal a fatal blow to Yi Chen-feng. You want to hurt my boss? In your next life. Before Zhun Taohai, who had burned his saint spirit, could get close, the Chaos Divine Beast turned into a Chaos Mountain and descended from the sky. He sat on Zhun Taohai's head and smashed him to the ground. creating a huge pit in the ground. His body and head were shattered. Then, a powerful airflow came out of the chaos divine beasts, but it was like a sharp sword that crushed Jun Taohai's fragile soul, killing him instantly. Roar, roar, this feels so good. The chaos divine beast stood up and roared, "Who else?" Yi Qianfeng, I admit defeat today, but don't be happy too early. The Heavenly Sword Hall will avenge us. Looking at the situation in front of him, Zhu Yanlong knew that he was powerless. However, he believed that no matter how strong Yi Qianfeng was, he would not be stronger than the Heavenly Sword Hall and the Sword God. Sooner or later, Yi Qianfeng would be killed by the Sword God. Don't worry, it won't be long before I go to the Heavenly Sword Hall and pay a visit to the Sword God. Yi Qianfeng smiled arrogantly and said, "But you won't live to see that day." As he said that, Yi Qianfeng suddenly used Soulless Sword, crushing the sharp sword rays and piercing through Zhu Yanlong's body. Yi Qianfeng, die with me. Zhu Yanlong's body was penetrated. He was like an octopus, clasping Yi Qianfeng's body tightly. He detonated his Saint Core and launched a fatal attack on him. Boom! An explosive force that could shatter space erupted from Zhu Yanlong's body, directly smashing a black hole in the chaotic space. An endless storm spread out, covering everything. Dead. Yi Qianfeng is dead. Seeing that Zhu Yanlong was actually hugging Yi Qianfeng and self-destructing at the last moment, Xian Ziwei, Qian Bingzi, and the others who were hiding in the distance widened their eyes in disbelief. Sigh. This Yi Qianfeng is too careless. He will never know how terrifying a person who is going to die is. If he is more careful. Maybe. Xian Yi gently shook his head, but before he could finish his words, he saw a proud figure walking out of the explosion storm, and he was not injured at all. How is this possible? Xian Yi knew how terrifying the power of a 4-star Dao ancestor's self-destruction was. Even a mid-grade ancestral artifact might not be able to withstand it. But Yi Qianfeng was not injured at all. It could be said that Yi Qianfeng was heaven-defying beyond his imagination. End this quickly and kill them all. After using the undying divine ability to instantly repair his broken body, Yi Qianfeng mercilessly ordered. In less than 10 breaths, the remaining experts of the 3 sects and 1 clan were mercilessly killed by the God-Fiend Torch Dragon, the Chaos Divine Beast, and the others. The entire sky, Sword Mountain, turned into a purgatory, terrifying everyone. Young Master Yi, the Qian family is willing to submit to you. Seeing that Yi Qianfeng took away everyone's belongings and walked over with the God-Fiend Torch Dragon and the others, the frightened Qian Tong's legs went soft, and he directly knelt on the blood-stained snowy ground. As for the beautiful and flirtatious Qian Bingzi, she looked deeply at Yi Qianfeng before obediently kneeling down. Although the mystic Sword Grotto Heaven and the others did not kneel, they all bent down at this moment. You are very smart to not choose to go against me. Yi Qianfeng glanced at the experts of the 2 forces and said, I have always been unwilling to kill. As long as you don't become my enemy in the future, I will not make things difficult for you. Unwilling to kill. Looking at the broken bodies on the ground, the corner of Qian Tong's mouth twitched. He respectfully kowtowed and said, Thank you, young Master Yi, for not killing us. I promise you that the Qian family will never become your enemy. What about you? Yi Qianfeng looked at Xuanyi and the others. Yi Qianfeng, although you are very strong, I will surpass you and defeat you. Xian Ziwei did not back down. She looked into Yi Qianfeng's eyes and swore. Xian Ziwei's challenge made Xuanyi and the others tremble. They were afraid that Yi Qianfeng would kill them in a fit of anger. I will wait for this day. Yi Qianfeng still admired the cold and beautiful Xian Ziwei. In her, Yi Qianfeng saw his own shadow. He did not bicker with her and said, Let's go. We will go to the heaven-shaking sword sect. Chapter 1892. Although the mysterious Sword Grotto and the Qian family intended to block the news, what happened at the peak of the Sky Sword Mountain was spread by Zhu Yanlong and the others, causing a huge commotion in the sword domain. When the divine messenger of the heavenly sword hall heard the news and rushed to the peak of the sky sword mountain, he was shocked by the scene before him. Piles of dismembered corpses were piled up on the peak of the sky sword mountain. The thick smell of blood drifted in the air and did not dissipate for a long time. Just as the heavenly sword hall was furious and issued the highest arrest warrant for Yi Chunfeng appeared at the heaven-shaking sword sect. Relying on his absolute strength, he broke the ancestral formation of the heaven-shaking sword sect and let the primitive embryo devour their ancestral land. He also looted the heaven-shaking sword sect. After looting the heaven-shaking sword sect, Yi Chunfeng went to the Hunyuan sword sect and the Tantai family. Using the same method, he let the primitive embryo of Tao and the primitive clone of the spiritual fish devour their ancestral land and looted their treasure vaults. When the news of the two sects and one family's ancestral land being destroyed and looted spread, it caused another huge commotion in the sword domain. Yi Chunfeng's name also completely resounded in the sword domain. When the high-spirited Qinda, who had borrowed Yi Chunfeng's might, heard this news, he was so frightened that he lost 2 out of 3 souls. He immediately sealed off the Qin clan and announced to the public that he was not familiar with Yi Chunfeng. As for Qin Rulan and Qin Xinmei, they did not dare to believe the news. In their eyes, the 3 sects and 2 families were high and mighty, sacred and inviolable. The Qijue Sword Palace was a godlike existence. But now, Yi Chunfeng actually killed hundreds of people in the Qijue Sword Palace and destroyed the ancestral land of the 2 sects and 1 family. This kind of scene made them feel like they were dreaming. Just as the Heavenly Sword Hall was chasing after Yi Chunfeng and the entire sword domain was talking about Yi Chunfeng appeared outside the Qijue Sword Palace, the head of the 3 palaces in the sword domain. Because they were afraid of Yi Chunfeng's revenge, the Qijue Sword Palace had closed the palace door early and activated the powerful palace protection array, isolating the entire Qijue Mountain. You want to stop me with a mere formation? The white-robed Yi Chunfeng glanced at the Qijue Sword Palace that was enveloped by a powerful formation and isolated from the rest of the world. He revealed a cold smile. The reason why he came to the Qijue Sword Palace was because his primitive Tao embryo had devoured the ancestral land of the 2 sects and 1 clan and was on the verge of breaking through. If he were to let his primitive Tao embryo devour another powerful ancestral land, it would most likely break through to the 5-star Tao ancestor realm. Once the primitive Tao embryo broke through, his battle prowess would be greatly enhanced. Space-swallowing insects break through this space restriction. Yi Chunfeng summoned the space swallower bug and ordered loudly. That's easy. Although the restriction formation of the Qijue Sword Palace was powerful, it was not difficult for the space swallower bug. It opened its mouth full of fangs and devoured the restriction formation. Soon, a gap was formed in the restriction formation. Whoosh! With a flash, Yi Chunfeng passed through the gap in the seal and entered the picturesque 7 Extremes Mountains. The Qijue Sword Palace really knows how to find a place. There are so many veins of the sky in the 7 Extremes Mountains. Yi Chunfeng walked up the stone steps and walked into the 7 Extremes Mountains. He felt that the spiritual qi in the 7 Extremes Mountains was extremely rich, and there were many powerful veins of the sky. The vegetation in the 7 Extremes Mountains was also thicker and more ancient than the outside world. Stop! Who are you? How did you get in? As Yi Chunfeng was enjoying the beautiful scenery on both sides of the ancient road and climbing the 7 Extremes Mountains, an angry voice came into his ears. In the next moment, 3 disciples of the Qijue Sword Palace in black martial arts suits and holding sharp longswords appeared. They stopped Yi Chunfeng and questioned him fiercely. Of course I walked in. Yi Chunfeng raised his head slightly and looked at the 3 disciples of the Qijue Sword Palace and said with a smile, Bullsh *T. Our Qijue Sword Palace is under the restriction formation. How did you walk in? A tall disciple of the Qijue Sword Palace scolded loudly. Then you tell me how I got in. The smile on Yi Chunfeng's face became even wider. I don't care how you came in, but my Chiju Sword Palace is not a place for you to behave atrociously. If you know what's good for you, surrender. Otherwise, don't blame us for killing you." The taller disciple warned coldly. "Surrender," Yi Chunfeng said indifferently. "All right, I will stand here. Come and catch me." "Good, good, good. Let's see if you are still so arrogant after we capture you." As they spoke, the three disciples of the Chiju Sword Palace were about to capture Yi Chunfeng. However, when their hands touched Yi Chunfeng's body, they were rebounded as if they were electrocuted. Yi Chunfeng did not want to be entangled with the three of them. He continued to climb the stone steps with his hands behind his back and enjoyed the beautiful scenery of the Seven Extremes Mountains. "How dare you? Where do you think you are going?" The tall disciple of the Chiju Sword Palace roared angrily. He used an extremely powerful sword move and stabbed towards Yi Chunfeng's back. However, when the sharp long sword in his hand stabbed into Yi Chunfeng's back, he felt as if he was stabbing into black iron. Not only was he unable to pierce into Yi Chunfeng's back, a strong rebounding force was transmitted into his arm, causing his arm to go numb. He almost lost his grip on the long sword in his hand. Just as he refused to give up and continued to attack, a powerful dizziness blasted into his soul's sea, crushing his soul and killing him on the spot. Yi Chunfeng could tolerate his ignorance, but he would not allow him to repeatedly offend him. After using the dizziness technique to kill the tall disciple, Yi Chunfeng did not stop. Under the fearful gaze of the two disciples, he continued to walk towards the Chiju Sword Palace. Enemy attack, enemy attack. Only when Yi Chunfeng was far away did the two disciples dare to breathe. They stretched out their trembling hands and took out their communication beads to send a message to the elders of the Chiju Sword Palace. Immediately, the entire Chiju Sword Palace fell into chaos. Powerful formations appeared in the void and locked onto Yi Chunfeng, who was slowly ascending as if he was taking a stroll. About 2 hours later, Yi Chunfeng finished enjoying the beautiful scenery of the Seven Extremes Mountains. His state of mind had been tempered. Like an unsheathed sword, he directly flew into the air and tore apart the formations that locked onto him. Like a celestial being, he appeared outside the Chiju Sword Palace at the peak of the Seven Extremes Mountains. "My apologies for keeping everyone waiting." Yi Chunfeng smiled faintly as he looked at the many Seven Absolute Sword Palace experts standing outside the Seven Absolute Sword Palace's gates, looking at him with surging auras as if they were facing a great enemy. "You are Yi Chunfeng." Although the experts of the Chiju Sword Palace had never seen Yi Chunfeng before, there were not many people who dared to cause trouble at the Chiju Sword Palace. Yi Chunfeng was the most likely one. "Yes, it's me." Yi Chunfeng nodded and admitted frankly. "Yi Chunfeng, you killed the great elder of my Chiju Sword Palace and more than 20 people of my Chiju Sword Palace. Now, you've come to my Chiju Sword Palace to cause trouble. Aren't you going too far? Yes, our Chiju Sword Palace is not a pushover. You can't just pinch us as you wish. You dare to come to our Chiju Sword Palace? We will make sure you don't return." The experts of the Chiju Sword Palace were filled with righteous indignation. "Are you all done?" Facing the accusations of the crowd, Yi Chunfeng remained unmoved with his hands behind his back. "If you are, then come together. It will save more time." Chapter 1893. Yi Chunfeng, if you retreat now, the enmity between the Chiju Sword Palace and you will be written off. How about that? Just as the mighty figures of the Chiju Sword Palace were about to explode from Yi Chunfeng's arrogance, a deep and sharp voice rang out in the Chiju Sword Palace. In the next moment, hundreds of Chiju Sword Palace experts who were eyeing covetously automatically opened up a path. The palace master of the Chiju Sword Palace, Zhu Wuqing, who was dressed in a black robe and had a tall and straight figure like a sharp sword, walked with an unparalleled sharpness. Retreat. Although Zhu Wuqing's aura was very terrifying and had reached the level of a 5-star Dao ancestor, there was no trace of panic on Yi Chunfeng's face. "Since I am here, do you think I will retreat because of you? Yi Chunfeng, I don't know where you came from, but the Chiju Sword Palace can become the head of the 3 palaces in the Sword region. It is not something that you alone can shake." Zhu Wuqing's turbid eyes shot out rays of light. He stared at Yi Chen-feng and said, I advise you not to harm yourself because of your arrogance. Sorry, I don't believe in heresy. Yi Chen-feng shook his head and said, I think I can destroy your Qiju's sword palace. A 6-star Dao god old man glared at Yi Chen-feng and roared with righteous indignation. Palace master, don't talk nonsense with this little bastard. After I capture him, I will cut off his flesh piece by piece. Let's see if he will still be so stubborn. The reason why he hated Yi Chen-feng so much was that among the 20 or so Qiju's sword palace experts killed by Yi Chen-feng, one of them was his elder brother, who was also his pillar. Now that his elder brother was dead, his position in the Qiju's sword palace was greatly affected. This made him want to eat Yi Chen-feng's flesh and drink Yi Chen-feng's blood. Capture me? Yi Chen-feng's pupils shrank into the most dangerous pinholes. He looked at the roaring old man and said, You won't live to see that day. As he spoke, Yi Chen-feng's powerful soul force erupted from his mind, forming a terrifying dizziness. It was like a heavy hammer smashing into his soul sea. Pooh! The old man's soul trembled. He was directly crushed by the terrifying dizziness. A large amount of blood flowed out from his 7 orifices. His body swayed and fell into a pool of blood. He breathed his last. Yi Chen-feng, you dare to kill the almighty of my 7 absolute sword palace in front of me. Zhu Wuqing's expression sank. His turbid eyes shot out an endless murderous glint as he spoke in a deep voice. An ant dares to offend me. Shouldn't I trample it to death? Yi Chen-feng coldly snorted and said without backing down. Palace Master, this Yi Chen-feng is too arrogant. Palace Master, please take action and capture him. As the head of the 3 palaces in the sword domain, the 7 absolute sword palace had never suffered such humiliation. One by one, the proud and arrogant experts of the 7 absolute sword palace roared in uncontrollable anger. Buzz, buzz, buzz. Yi Chen-feng's sharp eyes swept across the 3 almighties of the 7 absolute sword palace who were the most arrogant. The soul force in his mind erupted again, forming a dizziness technique. It smashed into their soul seas, crushing their souls and killing them. Yi Chen-feng stood still and killed for almighties of the 7 absolute sword palace. The others were so frightened that they closed their eyes and retreated. Their eyes were filled with fear as they looked at him. Now who dares to scold me? Yi Chen-feng glanced at the almighties of the 7 absolute sword palace, whose faces were flushed red. They were angry but didn't dare to speak as he questioned them in an overbearing manner. Yi Chen-feng, you are indeed capable. I will wait for you in the 7 absolute sword palace. Zhu Wuqing was also very afraid of Yi Chen-feng's methods. He was afraid that he would start a massacre. Thus, he led the sullen experts of the 7 absolute sword palace and retreated into the 7 absolute sword palace. You want to use the ancestral vein of the 7 absolute sword palace to deal with me? Yi Chen-feng guessed Zhu Wuqing's intention, but he wasn't afraid. He took even steps and crossed the majestic door of the 7 absolute sword palace. He walked into the 7 absolute sword palace that had stood tall in the sword domain for tens of millions of years. Buzz, buzz, buzz. The moment Yi Chen-feng walked into the 7 absolute sword palace, a mysterious sword diagram suddenly appeared above his head. It interweaved with thousands of incomparably sharp sword rays and attacked him. Zhu Wuqing, don't use such fearless tricks. It's useless against me. Yi Chen-feng's mind moved as his ancestral sword's soul flew out of his soul sea. Like a black lightning bolt, it bombarded the mysterious sword diagram. The sword pierced through the mysterious sword diagram and shattered the Dao patterns in the sword diagram, breaking the sword diagram. After breaking the sword diagram, Yi Chen-feng continued to walk into the 7 absolute sword palace. Not long after, he was attacked by the mysterious sword diagram again. Although the sword diagrams engraved in the Qiju's sword palace were powerful, they couldn't break through the defense of Yi Chen-feng's ancestral armor. Yi Chen-feng controlled his ancestral sword soul to break through the diagrams until they arrived at the deepest part of the Qiju's sword palace. There was a magnificent hall with 108 stone swords standing in front of it. Right above this hall, there was a floating sword diagram that was slowly floating. Powerful sword intents were leaking out from the sword diagram and fusing with Zhu Wuqing, who was standing under the sword diagram like a sword monarch. Yi Chenfeng, this is your last chance. If you don't leave now, I'm afraid you won't have another chance. Zhu Wuqing looked at Yi Chenfeng with a sharp gaze and warned him coldly. The reason why he repeatedly tried to persuade Yi Chenfeng was because he had scruples about Yi Chenfeng. He didn't want to fight to the death with him. Zhu Wuqing, you talk too much nonsense. Yi Chenfeng shook his head and remained unmoved. Come on, let's fight. Don't waste any more time. All right. Zhu Wuqing saw that a battle was unavoidable and didn't waste any more time. He shouted, "Sword come!" Buzz, buzz, buzz. The entire ground trembled and cracked open. A dazzling golden sword engraved with ancient runes flew out from the ground. A golden dragon was swimming around the body of the sword, and the hilt was as dazzling as the sun. A middle-grade ancestral sword. I didn't expect your Qijue Sword Palace to have such a foundation. Yi Chenfeng felt that the power of the Qijue Sword Palace's golden sword was above the flying immortal sword. However, he wasn't afraid. An ancestral sword soul was enough to make up for the difference in power. Yi Chenfeng, I'd like to see what you're relying on to provoke my Qijue Sword Palace. As he said that, Zhu Wuqing fused with the slowly rotating sword diagram and slashed at Yi Chenfeng. The entire space trembled violently as the sword slashed out. A terrifying sword ray left a long sword mark in the space as it slashed towards Yi Chenfeng. Zhu Wuqing is indeed worthy of being the palace master of the Qijue Sword Palace. His strength is indeed terrifying. Feeling the power of Zhu Wuqing's sword, Yi Chenfeng didn't take it head-on. He executed his sword steps and instantly transformed into several afterimages as he dodged the shocking sword. Yi Chenfeng, aren't you very powerful? Why are you still dodging? Seeing Yi Chenfeng dodging his attack, Zhu Wuqing's heart calmed down as he mocked loudly. The almighty expert of the Qijue Sword Palace, who was hiding in the Golden Palace, added more malicious words as he ridiculed Yi Chenfeng for overestimating himself. Don't worry, it's just a warm-up. Yi Chenfeng deliberately stretched his back and warmed up his body. All right. I like to see how long you can be so stubborn. Zhu Wuqing's face sank as he continued to attack Yi Chenfeng ferociously with his golden sword. The swift and fierce sword wind swept across the sky and sealed off all of Yi Chenfeng's dodging space. Chapter 1894. Primordial Bloodline Ignition. Life Soul Technique. 20,000 years of lifespan burn. Zhu Wuqing's murderous aura surged forward. Yi Chenfeng did not hesitate and decisively ignited his primordial bloodline ignition in 10,000 years of lifespan, instantly raising his strength to the level of a 4-star Dao ancestor. He had used the Life Soul technique because he had looted the treasure vault of the 2 sects and 1 clan for millions of years. He had obtained 15 fruits that contained powerful life energy. Each of these fruits could restore 20,000 years of lifespan, which was enough for him to use the Life Soul technique without fear. As for Fa Tianzu, Shun Daoxiu, and the others, they were his trump cards to deal with Sword God. Unless it was absolutely necessary, he did not want to expose them in advance to avoid alarming the Divine Sky Clan, which had an empty God Realm Almighty. After his strength skyrocketed to the level of a 4-star Dao ancestor, Yi Chenfeng's physical strength had reached 2 trillion jin. His combat strength had increased by more than 100 times. Boom! Yi Chenfeng gripped the demon sealing sword tightly. After merging with his ancestral sword soul, he tore apart the incomparably sharp sword wind and collided with merciless golden sword. The terrifying impact instantly tore open cracks in space. What? That Yi Chenfeng actually blocked the palace master's attack head-on. This guy is really strong. Although Zhu Wuqing had not entered the Heavenly Sword Hall, his combat strength far surpassed the 4 Great Sword Envoys and was comparable to the 3 Great Sword Venerables. Very few people could defeat him head-on. All right, the warm-up is over. Although Yi Qinfeng's current combat strength was still not as good as Zhu Wuqing's, his 2 trillion gene of strength made up for the difference. Yi Qinfeng believed that with his terrifying physical strength, he could crush Zhu Wuqing, who was a 5-star Dao ancestor. Whoosh! An ear-piercing sound broke through the air. Yi Qinfeng increased his speed to the maximum and instantly transformed into several afterimages, attacking Zhu Wuqing with lightning speed. Facing Yi Qinfeng's lightning-fast attack, the powerful and experienced Zhu Wuqing did not panic. He held the golden sword in his hand and counterattacked with all his strength, fighting fiercely with Yi Qinfeng in the 7 Absolute Sword Palace. 7 Absolute Sword Destruction. After forcefully breaking through Yi Qinfeng's tide-like attacks, Heartless leaped high into the air and slashed out 7 times in an instant. The power of Zhu Wuqing's 7 deadly sword strike was not something that Zhu Yanlong could compare to. The 7 swords slashed down, transforming into 7 towering sword mountains. The terrifying sword intent surged toward Yi Qinfeng like an avalanche, pressuring him to the point that he couldn't breathe. 3,000 God-transforming fists. The 7 sword mountains rushed over. Yi Qinfeng threw the flying celestial sword high up in the air and punched out with both his fists at the same time. In an instant, more than 2,000 invincible divine fists were unleashed. Like a meteor shower, they collided with the 7 sword mountains in mid-air. Boom, boom, boom. A series of explosions rang out in the void. Once the 2 killer moves collided, the intense repulsion caused huge waves to surge in the air. Although the entire 7 Absolute Sword Palace was enveloped by several layers of powerful restrictions, it still couldn't withstand the destructive power caused by the collision of the 2 killer moves. It was filled with crisscrossing cracks, and the entire 7 Absolute Sword Palace was trembling. Although Zhu Wuqing's 7 Ultimate Sword of Destruction was powerful, Yi Qinfeng's 3,000 God-transforming fists was a supreme mystical power. In addition, he had fused his strength of close to 1 trillion kilograms and forcibly shattered the 7 sword mountains. What? Zhu Wuqing was greatly shocked when Yi Qinfeng destroyed the 7 deadly sword strike. He couldn't believe that Yi Qinfeng had such ability. He was even more shocked by the power of the 3,000 God-transforming fist. Could it be that the fist radiance he just blasted out was a supreme divine ability? The power of the 7 deadly sword strike was almost at the pinnacle of supreme divine ability. Only a supreme divine ability could destroy the 7 deadly sword strike head-on. Who is he? How does he know a supreme divine ability? Zhu Wuqing felt that Yi Qinfeng's identity wasn't simple. His appearance might cause a huge change in the sword domain. Ethereal sword scripture, ethereal great Dao sword. Yi Qinfeng had cultivated the sword Dao to an extremely high level. Any sword move in his hands could turn into something magical. With a slash, for ancestral Dao diagrams gushed out from his body and turned into a long river of great Dao sword shadows. The sword split open the chaotic space and slashed towards Zhu Wuqing. When Zhu Wuqing broke the ethereal great Dao sword with his absolute strength, Yi Qinfeng continued to perform the sword moves he had comprehended earlier and launched a fierce attack at Zhu Wuqing. Boundless 3-foot sword. Gu Jianga, Heart of Sword Bright Moon. Horizontal sword slash. Yi Qinfeng's attacks were getting more and more fierce. The endless stream of moves shocked Zhu Wuqing. However, Zhu Wuqing had been cultivating the sword Dao for nearly 1,000,000 years. His mastery of the sword Dao had reached an extremely terrifying level. In addition to his terrifying strength, Yi Qinfeng's continuous attacks didn't hurt him. Universe Sword Array. Unable to suppress Zhu Wuqing's attacks, Yi Qinfeng immediately changed his move. He summoned 600 universe swords. After the initial slaughter and plundering, Yi Qinfeng obtained 110 half-ancestral swords and more than 500 supreme great sky-piercing sacred swords. They greatly increased the power of the universe sword array. Slash. With a thought, Yi Qinfeng controlled the 600 Qinquan swords and merged them together, forming a huge Chinquin sword that was dozens of feet long. Sword will pour down like a waterfall as it slashed towards Zhu Wuqing. 7 fatalities break all laws. As the huge universe sword slashed towards him, Zhu Wuqing immediately used a technique that could break all laws and forcibly shattered the huge universe sword. However, the moment he shattered the Chinquin giant sword, the eye of the ancestral dragon split open on Yi Qinfeng's forehead. It shot out a beam of light that pierced through the chaotic space and attacked Zhu Wuqing, whose expression changed slightly. He sensed a strong sense of danger and was defending with all his might. The offensive power of the eye of the ancestral dragon was comparable to a supreme-grade ancestral artifact. Under the full attack, Zhu Wuqing's defense was immediately shattered. The terrifying eye of the ancestral dragon ruthlessly attacked his body, penetrating his ancestral armor and injuring him. Not good. The palace lord is injured. Seeing Zhu Wuqing falling from the sky and covered in wounds, the hearts of the 7 fatalities, Sword Palace's almighty, instantly sank to the bottom. In their eyes, Zhu Wuqing was like a god. If Zhu Wuqing was defeated, the consequences would be too severe. The 7 fatalities, Sword Palace might really be flattened by Yi Qinfeng. The ancestral dragon continued to attack. After burning his primordial blood, Yi Qinfeng possessed boundless ancestral power. He could continuously control the eye of the ancestral dragon to attack. After experiencing the terror of the eye of the ancestral dragon, Zhu Wuqing didn't dare to take it head-on. He constantly used unpredictable movement techniques and dodged with all his might. Zhu Wuqing, aren't you very powerful? Why are you still dodging? Yi Qinfeng imitated Zhu Wuqing's tone and ridiculed him. Zhu Wuqing was so angry that his teeth were itching and his lungs were about to explode. Yi Qinfeng, don't be arrogant. I don't believe you can control that vertical eye to attack endlessly. The stronger the ancestral artifact, the greater the consumption. Zhu Wuqing didn't believe that Yi Qinfeng could continuously control the eye of the ancestral dragon to attack. Zhu Wuqing, I didn't expect you to be a frog at the bottom of a well. Yi Qinfeng revealed a trace of disdain and said, you can count how long I can last. As he spoke, Yi Qinfeng continuously controlled the powerful ancestral power and merged it into the eye of the ancestral dragon. He controlled the eye of the ancestral dragon to attack continuously. He chased after Zhu Wuqing, who was in a sorry state, in front of everyone's eyes. 10 breaths, 20 breaths, half an incense sticks time, 1 incense sticks time, 1 hour. Yi Qinfeng was like a machine that never knew fatigue. He controlled the eye of the ancestral dragon to attack continuously and used his speed ability. Even Zhu Wuqing, who was constantly dodging, was somewhat exhausted. However, he was still in high spirits and didn't show any signs of weakness. Damn, how can this be? What kind of freak is he? Chapter 1895. Sword Diagram Attack. Seeing that he couldn't dodge the attack of the ancestral dragon's eye, Zhu Wuqing immediately controlled the sword diagram that was full of cracks to descend. It turned into tens of thousands of sword radiances and attacked Yi Qinfeng. Cosmos Sword Formation Block. The sword diagram attacked. Yi Qinfeng immediately controlled the 600 Cosmos swords to form the Cosmos Sword Diagram above his head, blocking the attack of the sword diagram. Then, Yi Qinfeng fused with the flying immortal sword and slashed at Zhu Wuqing with the soulless sword. When the sword slashed out, a terrifying black sword shadow soared into the sky. The terrifying sword aura seemed to want to split the heaven and earth. In an instant, the heaven and earth turned pitch black. All the light was devoured by the black sword radiance. It was as if this invincible divine sword was the only thing left in the world. The soulless sword's attack speed was too fast. It was so fast that Zhu Wuqing couldn't dodge it. The sword ruthlessly slashed his body, leaving behind a large amount of blood in the air as he was sent flying. Defeated, Palace Lord is really defeated. Seeing that Zhu Wuqing's body was almost split apart by Yi Qinfeng, the hearts of the Qiju Sword Palace's experts fell to the bottom. Many of them panicked. Yi Qinfeng, Come with me if you have the guts. With his injury serious, Zhu Wuqing didn't dare to fight with Yi Qianfeng again. He flew towards the ancestral vein of the Qiju's sword palace at an extremely fast speed. He wanted to borrow the power of the ancestral vein to kill Yi Qianfeng. Why wouldn't I dare? Yi Qianfeng guessed Zhu Wuqing's intention. He came to the Qiju's sword palace for the ancestral land. He followed Zhu Wuqing and arrived at the ancestral vein of the Qiju's sword palace. It was a deep valley where ancient trees grew. What a powerful ancestral vein! The Qiju's sword palace is indeed the leader of the three great sword palaces in the sword domain, second only to the heavenly sword palace. The ancestral vein here is much stronger than the three sects. Feeling the power of the ancestral vein of the Qiju's sword palace, Yi Qianfeng wasn't shocked. Instead, he was delighted. He immediately summoned the two primitive embryos and had them break into the solid ancestral land to devour the power of the ancestral vein. Not good. Seeing the two embryos' actions, Zhu Wuqing's expression changed slightly. He immediately mobilized the ancestral power to attack the two embryos, wanting to destroy them. However, the primitive Tao embryo was the first stone of the universe. After countless years of evolution, it was indestructible. Even the ancestral power of the seven absolute sword palace could not destroy it. Yi Qianfeng, what are you trying to do? Sensing that the power of the ancestral vein was continuously draining away, the severely injured Zhu Wuqing panicked. If the Qiju's sword palace lost the power of the ancestral vein, even if they could kill Yi Qianfeng in the end, they would suffer an immeasurable loss. The status of the Qiju's sword palace would plummet. Of course, I'm going to devour your Qiju's sword palace's ancestral vein. Yi Qianfeng was not in a hurry to make a move. Yi Qianfeng, if you stop now, I'm willing to give you an ancestral artifact. He couldn't win, and his ancestral land, which he relied on the most, was being devoured. This made Zhu Wuqing panic, and he shouted loudly, "Ancestral artifact? I don't lack it." The two-souled devourer child brains would soon be able to control the Grim Reaper. Once the Grim Reaper was controlled, the 10 ancestral artifacts that suppressed him would be Yi Qianfeng's. Therefore, the ancestral artifacts that were incomparably precious in the eyes of ordinary Ancestor Realm experts were not attractive to Yi Qianfeng. Now, the only things that could attract Yi Qianfeng were supreme-grade ancestral artifacts and the legendary Void God artifacts that had the power to destroy the world. Yi Qianfeng, you really want to fight to the death with my 7 absolutes sword palace? Zhu Wuqing roared furiously while controlling the power of the ancestral vein to fuse into his body to suppress his injuries. Haven't we already fought to the death? Yi Qianfeng said in silence. You? Zhu Wuqing was so infuriated by Yi Qianfeng that he wished he could cut him into 1,000 pieces. Yi Qianfeng, what do you want to let go of my 7 absolutes sword palace? Sensing that the ancestral vein was unable to destroy the 2 primitive Tao embryos and that the speed of the ancestral vein's power was uncontrollable, Zhu Wuqing had no choice but to admit defeat. Very simple. Don't provoke me anymore and let me devour your 7 absolutes sword palace's ancestral vein. Then I will leave. Yi Qianfeng said indifferently. Go to hell. Zhu Wuqing could no longer control the anger in his heart and attacked Yi Qianfeng with the powerful ancestral vein's power. Under his furious attack, the surging power of the ancestral vein gushed out from his body and formed a huge wave behind him that seemed to want to shatter the sky dome. Doubt of equipment control, death scythe slash. Zhu Wuqing controlled the powerful ancestral aura to attack. Yi Qianfeng immediately executed the Tao of equipment control and slashed out the death scythe. 1. Under the activation of the Tao of equipment manipulation, the tens of thousands of ancestral runes on the death scythe came to life. The terrifying death scythe transformed into a crescent moon, like a demonic black moon. With a single slash, it cut through the endless ancestral might and slashed at Heartless, who couldn't dodge in time. Zhu Wuqing couldn't dodge in time, and his arm was severed by the death scythe. The terrifying power of death directly chopped his severed arm and half of his body into pieces. He fell to the ancestral ground with a wail. Sub-Supreme Grade Ancestral Artifact. You actually have a Supreme Grade Ancestral Artifact. Sensing the destructive power of the Death Scythe, Zhu Wuqing, who was seriously injured and had consumed several precious ancestral elixirs, revealed a look of horror. What kind of look is that? Didn't you notice that the Eye of the Ancestral Dragon is also a Supreme Grade Ancestral Artifact? Yi Qinfeng gave Zhu Wuqing a meaningful look and said in his heart, Zhu Wuqing, do you have any last words? If not, let me send you on your way. Yi Qinfeng looked down at the seriously injured Zhu Wuqing and said ruthlessly, don't hurt the Palace Master. We are willing to exchange our lives for the Palace Master's. Zhu Wuqing had a lofty position in the Qijue Sword Palace and was the spiritual pillar of the Qijue Sword Palace. Seeing that he was in danger, the almighties of the Qijue Sword Palace ignored the danger and flew over, shielding Zhu Wuqing. Get out of the way. This has nothing to do with you. Zhu Wuqing, who was extremely weak after using the ancestral elixirs to forcefully repair his broken body, ordered loudly, Palace Master, leave this place quickly. We will help you stop him. The Almighty of the Seven Absolutes Sword Palace didn't leave and were ready to die. Junior, stop. Just as Yi Qinfeng was feeling the spirit of the Seven Absolutes Sword Palace and was considering whether to spare Zhu Wuqing's life, an old voice suddenly sounded. In the next moment, a huge stone coffin flew out from the forbidden ground of the Seven Absolutes Sword Palace. When the stone coffin opened, an old man in a linen robe with snow-white hair, casually draped over his shoulders, walked out of the stone coffin. His face was covered in wrinkles and black spots. The Almighty of the Seven Absolutes Sword Palace, who were in despair, revealed looks of disbelief when they saw this linen-robed old man. They all knelt on the ground with tears streaming down their faces. Chapter 1896. A peak 5-star Tao Ancestor. Sensing the terrifying aura emanating from Patriarch Seven Absolutes, Yi Qinfeng immediately guessed that he was a peak 5-star Tao Ancestor and was only one step away from breaking through to the 6-star Tao Ancestor realm. Junior, stop. Stop devouring my Seven Absolutes Sword Palace's ancestral vein. Patriarch Seven Absolutes, who had one foot in the 6-star Tao Ancestor realm and the other foot in the gates of hell, said in a low voice. If not for the fact that the Seven Absolute Sword Palace was on the brink of death and had faked his death, Patriarch Seven Absolutes, who had been in seclusion for tens of thousands of years, would never have come out. With his current physical condition, he would die of old age if he could not take that final step. What if I don't agree? The two primitive Tao embryos, who were continuously devouring the ancestral vein, were about to break through. Yi Qinfeng would never back down. Hey, Junior, why do you have to be so overbearing? Patriarch Seven Absolutes sighed softly and summoned the Seven Absolutes Sword Palace's treasure, the golden sword, into his hand. Patriarch, please take action and kill the invading enemy. Patriarch Seven Absolutes had shocked the entire sword domain tens of thousands of years ago. Even the three supremacies of Heavenly Sword Palace were no match for him. However, tens of thousands of years later, the Seven Absolutes Sword Palace's experts did not know how powerful he had become, but in their opinion, killing Yi Qinfeng should not be a big problem. However, Yi Qinfeng, who had the God-Eater brain, could clearly sense Patriarch Seven Absolutes' physical condition. Although Patriarch Seven Absolutes was very terrifying, his current physical condition made it impossible for him to attack for long periods of time. Once a fierce battle broke out, his vitality would be constantly drained, and he would soon die of old age. This was also the reason why old ancestor Qijue hadn't attacked Yi Qinfeng yet. Junior, have you really thought this through? If I attack, the chances of you dying are very high. Patriarch Seven Absolutes did not want to die. Otherwise, he would not have endured the loneliness and worked so hard to become a 6-star Tao Ancestor. You think too highly of yourself. Yi Qinfeng smiled and said, Let's not talk about your peak 5-star Tao Ancestor strength. Even if you break through to the 6-star Tao Ancestor realm, you still can't kill me. You could try if you don't believe me. Junior, are you that confident? Old Ancestor 7 Ultimates furrowed his brows tightly. Although Yi Chunfeng's talent and strength were the best he had ever seen, he was confident in his own strength. He believed that if he killed Yi Chunfeng regardless of the consequences, he would definitely have a chance to kill him. That's right. I'll say it here. If you dare make a move, I'll kill you. Yi Chunfeng nodded and said proudly, "Kill me." Old Ancestor 7 Absolutes was also a hot-tempered person back then. Being threatened by a junior in front of so many people, a raging flame ignited in his heart. He could barely control the killing intent in his heart and wanted to attack. Rumble. At this moment, the ancestral vein that was continuously draining away trembled, and a huge gap appeared. After devouring a large amount of ancestral power, the primitive Tao embryo broke through the last shackle and broke through to the level of 5-star Tao Ancestor, while the original clone of the spirit fish also broke through to the level of 2-star Tao Ancestor. A primordial Tao embryo at the level of 5-star Tao Father. Sensing the terror of the primitive Tao embryo that walked out of the ancestral vein, Old Ancestor 7 Extinction couldn't help but reveal a trace of seriousness on his face. He knew very well how terrifying the primitive Tao embryo was, and that he was absolutely no match for it at the same level. So this is what you're relying on. Looking at the primitive Tao embryo standing next to Chunfeng, Old Ancestor 7 Extinction hesitated and wondered if he should take the risk to attack. As for the 7 Extinction Sword Palace experts, they were also stunned by the destructive power that pervaded the primitive Tao embryo. The previously noisy ancestral ground quietened down. Sort of. The primitive Tao embryo was indeed what Yi Chunfeng was relying on, but it wasn't his greatest reliance. His true reliance was the several peak Ancestor Realm experts, but Old Ancestor 7 Extinction didn't know. Rumble. Just as Old Ancestor 7 Extinction was about to waver and retreat, a series of rumbles came from the sky above the 7 Extinction Sword Palace. 2 huge warships appeared above the 7 Extinction Sword Palace. It's the Gold Sword Palace and the Sky-Devouring Sword Palace. Seeing the flags hanging from the 2 warships, the stifling atmosphere in the 7 Extinction Sword Palace erupted into a heated clamor. In their opinion, the 3 great sword palaces gathered together could sweep through everything and definitely kill Yi Chunfeng. Old friend Xiongling. Old friend Slayer. I didn't expect to alarm you too. The leaders of the Sky-Devouring Sword Palace weren't the palace masters of the 2 great sword palaces, but Old Ancestors Gene Slayer and Xiongling, who were like Old Ancestors 7 Extinction. In addition to the 2 of them, the 2 great sword palaces had also sent more than 20 Ancestor Realm experts. Such a massive force was enough to destroy everything. This old man came into being because I want to see what kind of person that doesn't know the immensity of heaven and earth is. Xiongling, who was dressed in a black robe and had an aura that was several times stronger than Old Ancestor 7 Extinctions, glowered at Yi Chunfeng and gave off a ferocious feeling. That's right. I also want to know who destroyed the 3 sects and 1 clan and didn't take our 3 great sword palaces seriously. Gene Slayer, who was dressed in a dark brown robe and had a long beard, said with a murderous look. He was emitting a powerful sword intent. If you're done, you can all attack together. I'll finish you off and go to the Gold Sword Palace and the Sky-Devouring Sword Palace. In the face of 3 5-star Tao Ancestors and dozens of Ancestor Realm experts, Yi Chunfeng's arrogant face didn't reveal a trace of panic, as if the 3 great sword palaces were nothing in his eyes. How dare you? Xiongling's face darkened. An unparalleled sword light split from his body and slashed toward Yi Chunfeng like mercury. Xiongling was a peak 5-star Tao Ancestor Realm expert, and his life force was stronger than Old Ancestor 7 Extinctions. His sword slashed down and directly split the space. Just as the sword was about to hit Yi Chunfeng, the primitive embryo of Tao suddenly blocked in front of him and blasted out a punch that could shatter the void. The punch shattered the sword light that split from Xiangling's body. A 5-star, Dao Ancestor Realm primitive embryo of Dao. Sensing the strength of the primitive embryo of Dao, Xiangling's snow-white eyebrows twitched slightly, revealing a trace of surprise. Xiangling had heard of the primitive embryo of Dao before, but it was his first time seeing such a primitive embryo of Dao. 7 Extinction, Slayer. Let's attack together and suppress this primitive embryo of Dao first. Sensing the danger of the primitive embryo of Dao, Xiangling transmitted his voice to Old Ancestor, 7 Extinction, and the others. Okay, in the eyes of Old Ancestor, 7 Extinction, and the others, Yi Chunfeng's greatest reliance was the primitive embryo of Dao. As long as the primitive embryo of Dao was suppressed, Yi Chunfeng would have nothing to fear. Attack! With Xiangling's angry roar, Old Ancestor 7 Extinction and Old Ancestor 7 Extinction released the seals on their bodies and unleashed their strongest strength. They displayed terrifying sword power and attacked the primitive embryo of Dao. Although the primitive embryo of Dao had invincible defense and outstanding attack power, it was quickly suppressed by the combined attacks of the 3 Great Sword Palace's ancestors. Attack together and kill him. Chapter 1897. Is it useful to have more people? Yi Chunfeng shook his head and summoned the peak evil ancestor from the universe mirror. The peak evil ancestor appeared and immediately blocked in front of Yi Chunfeng, using his body to block the attacks of dozens of Ancestor Realm bigwigs. Although the attack of one Ancestor Realm bigwig couldn't threaten a peak Ancestor Realm bigwig, dozens of Ancestor Realm bigwigs attacking together was enough to destroy heaven and earth. Boom, boom, boom. A series of deafening explosions sounded. The space in front of Yi Chunfeng completely collapsed, revealing a huge black hole. The peak evil ancestor who didn't dodge had his body broken by the destructive power. However, when the destructive power gradually dispersed, the peak evil ancestor's broken body recovered at a speed visible to the naked eye. In the blink of an eye, it was restored to its original state. Witnessing the peak evil ancestor restoring his body and feeling the destructive power that filled his body, Tun Xiongling, Old Ancestor 7 Extinction, and the rest felt fear. Peak Ancestor Realm. That black robe man is a peak Ancestor Realm bigwig. Sensing that the peak evil ancestor's aura was several times more terrifying than Sky Sword Sovereign and Mysterious Sword Sovereign, Tun Xiongling and the rest had a feeling that the peak evil ancestor's strength was comparable to the peak of a 6-star Dao ancestor. Are you convinced? If you are, don't blame me for starting a massacre and slaughtering all of you. Yi Chunfeng threatened coldly. After summoning the peak evil ancestor, Yi Chunfeng suddenly changed his mind. Seeing the huge power of the sword domain, Yi Chunfeng had the idea of controlling the sword domain. If he could suppress Sword God, he might have the chance to control the power of the sword domain and make it his own. Yi Chunfeng, I did not expect you to have such a backing. However, a mere peak ancestor is not enough to make us bend our backs. Tun Xiongling and the other 2 old ancestors quickly communicated with each other through voice transmissions before speaking in an unyielding manner. Is that so? Yi Chunfeng smiled and summoned the 3 ancient ancestral flags. They swayed rapidly in the air, forming a large number of formation patterns that restricted the entire space. What? Do you want to fight us to the end? Although the fiend-devouring spirit didn't want to submit, the peak evil ancestor was a great threat to them. Coupled with the fact that he had a primitive Dao embryo at the level of a 5-star Dao ancestor, they weren't sure that they could win. If you want to fight to the death, I'll accompany you. With that, Yi Chunfeng summoned Fa Tian Ancestor from the universe mirror. F*CK, another peak progenitor. Looking at the white-robed Fa Tian Ancestor, whose ancestral aura was as vast as the ocean, Tun Xiongling and the others' expressions changed drastically. Some of the experts from the 7 Absolute Sword Palace even cursed. A single peak Ancestor Realm great figure was enough to pose a fatal threat to the 7 Absolute Sword Palace. Two peak ancestor realm great figures were enough to wipe them out. Now, do you still want to fight? Yi Feng said with a faint smile as he looked at Tun Xiongling, old ancestor Qijue, and the others, whose expressions changed drastically and revealed deep fear. Yi Feng, who exactly are you? Tun Xiongling, old ancestor Qijue, and the others had never dreamed that Yi Feng would have such a trump card. Their hearts fell into a bottomless abyss. Who I am is not important. What's important is that if you don't submit, you will be massacred by us. Yi Feng said with a domineering tone. Yi Feng, we will not submit to you. Tun Xiongling gritted his teeth and said, Is that so? Yi Feng smiled and said, I don't believe in heresy. With that, Yi Feng summoned the two peak ancestor realm great figures, empty god realm great figure and ancient god realm great figure. Immediately, the entire 7 absolute sword palace ancestral land fell silent. Pairs of dazed eyes uniformly looked at the 4 peak existences of the void god world, not knowing what to do. Damn, why didn't you say earlier that you had such a trump card? If you had said earlier, my 7 absolute sword palace would have submitted long ago. As for the current situation, isn't this a scam? Zhu Wuqing, who was seriously injured and would not be able to recover for several years, shouted in his heart. As for the 3 sword palace experts, they were scared out of their wits. There is a limit to my patience. If you all still do not submit, don't blame me for being merciless and killing all of you. Yi Feng said indifferently as he looked at Tun Xiongling and the others, whose eyes were wide open and filled with fear. Facing 2 peak ancestor realm great figures, Tun Xiongling and the others still wanted to use everyone's strength to resist, but facing 4 peak ancestor realm great figures, their inner defenses had completely collapsed. They did not doubt that the 4 peak ancestor realm great figures could easily slaughter them if they attacked together. What should we do? Tun Xiongling, old ancestor Qijue, and the others had the same thought in their minds, but they did not know how to answer. Why are you still hesitating? You have to know that your lives are already in my hands. If I want you to die, you have no hope of surviving. If you are willing to submit to me, I can give you an opportunity. Yi Feng said patiently. For example, let 7 absolute break through to the 6-star Dao ancestor realm. You can let me break through to the 6-star Dao ancestor realm. Yi Feng's words rang in old ancestor Qijue's ears like thunder. He opened his eyes wide and looked at Yi Feng in disbelief. In order to break through to the 6-star Dao ancestor realm, old ancestor Qijue could be said to have done everything he could. He had been in seclusion for hundreds of thousands of years, but he still could not succeed. Moreover, his physical body had already deteriorated. It was as difficult as ascending to the heavens to break through to the 6-star Dao ancestor realm. Look, what is this? With a thought, Yi Feng summoned a chaos divine fruit that was emitting 5-colored light and said, This is, as he gazed at the chaos divine fruit in Yi Feng's hand, old ancestor opened his eyes wide and asked with shock, If I'm not wrong, then ancestral pills aren't very useful to you with the current state of your body. Yi Feng gazed at old ancestor Qijue's eyes that were opening wider and wider. Old ancestor Qijue nodded and restrained his shock as he said, Exactly. My physical body is already deteriorated, so ancestral pills are useless to me. Ancestral pills are useless to you, but chaos divine fruits are. Yi Feng grinned and said, If you're willing to submit to me, then I'll give you an opportunity and give you this chaos divine fruit. Moreover, I'll help you break through to the 6-star Dao ancestor realm in 3 days. Are you sure? Yi Feng's words caused old ancestor Qijue to feel disbelief. Even though he'd heard of the chaos divine fruit, he didn't believe that a single chaos divine fruit could allow him to break through to the 6-star Dao Lord realm. Why don't we make a bet? If I'm able to help you break through to the 6-star Dao ancestor realm in 3 days, then you'll submit to me with the 7 absolute sword palace. If I'm unable to accomplish it, then I'll leave right away and absolutely won't make things difficult for all of you. Yi Feng spoke with a smile on his face. All right, it's a deal. When he heard Yi Chunfeng's bet, old ancestor Chijue agreed without the slightest hesitation, because this bet was utterly impossible for him to refuse. No matter if he won or lost, he wouldn't suffer a loss. Moreover, he subconsciously hoped that Yi Chunfeng would win. However, I have a condition. You and the 7 Absolute Sword Palace must listen to me during these 3 days. If you disobey my orders, then the bet will be voided, and your 7 Absolute Sword Palace will still have to submit to me. Yi Chunfeng spoke indifferently. To old ancestor Chijue, who'd lived for countless years, 3 days passed in the blink of an eye. Even if Yi Chunfeng humiliated him, he would grit his teeth and pass it. Chapter 1898. All right, 7 come here. After warning the 3 sword palaces, Yi Chunfeng called the white-haired 7 forefather, who was surrounded by Death Qi, to his side and had him sit cross-legged in front of him. Then, Yi Chunfeng controlled the God-Eater brain to quickly infer 7 forefather's body and thoroughly check his body. Sure enough, the God-devouring brain didn't sense wrongly. The accumulation in this 7 extinctions body was long enough to break through the bottleneck. But because he's too old, the vitality in his body is already lost, causing him to be unable to break through that final step. Yi Chunfeng retracted his released soul force and gained a deeper understanding of 7 extinctions body. Fa Tian, seal his body so that he can't use ancestral power. Yi Chunfeng turned to Fa Tian and ordered. All right. Fa Tian progenitor nodded and released a powerful stream of ancestral power into Fa Tian's body, forcefully sealing his meridians and ancestral power. Rumble. After sealing old ancestor 7 ultimates, Yi Chunfeng grabbed at the air, grabbing a boulder that was several meters tall and smashing it into the ancestral land. Tie him to the rock. Yi Chunfeng ordered. Remember, tie him tight. 7 forefather. Young Master Yi, what are you doing? Zhu Wuqing walked over while enduring his injuries and asked in confusion. Help him break through to the 6-star Dao ancestor realm. Yi Chunfeng glanced at Zhu Wuqing and said flatly, Wuqing, listen to young Master Yi. Don't waste time. In order to break through to the 6-star Dao ancestor realm and live for more than 100,000 years, 7 forefather was going all out. Yes, forefather. Although Zhu Wuqing was the palace master of 7 sword palace, the real controller was 7 forefather. Yi Chunfeng pointed at Zhu Wuqing and ordered, Go, take off all his clothes. Just leave his underwear. 7 forefather. Zhu Wuqing looked at 7 forefather's red face and asked hesitantly, Young Master Yi, do you really want to take them off? Of course. Yi Chunfeng waved his hand impatiently and said, Do as I say. Otherwise, don't blame me if something unexpected happens. Wuqing will do whatever young noble Yi says. Pull. He closed his eyes and gritted his teeth. Whoosh whoosh. Ripping sounds could be heard. Soon, the clothes on forefather 7 extinction's body were torn apart by Merciless, revealing a shriveled old body. Deathseeker, what do you think he's doing? Tun Xionglin's brows were tightly knitted together. Why do I feel that he is deliberately humiliating the 7 absolutes? I have the same feeling. Jean Soling nodded and said, It's impossible for 7 absolutes to break through to the 6-star Dao ancestor level in 3 days. I think it's very likely that he's humiliating 7 absolutes. Sigh, the pitiful Chijue. He is already so old, yet he is being humiliated in such a manner. If it was me, I would probably be too ashamed to continue living in this world. Tun Xiongling sighed softly. Xiongling, what do you say we should do? Facing 4 great peak ancestor realm experts, Jean Suoming had long since given up all hope. What else can we do? Tun Xiongling sighed and said, If we want to live and protect our 2 great sword palaces, we can only submit. Open your mouth and drink this. When Merciless tore forefather 7 absolutes' clothes, Yi Chunfeng took out a white jade bottle and poured it directly into forefather 7 absolutes' mouth. Young noble Yi, what did you give me? Forefather 7 absolutes felt that the thing Yi Chunfeng gave him did not have much spirituality and asked in puzzlement. Don't talk nonsense. Swallow this chaos divine fruit. Yi Chen Feng stuffed the extremely precious chaos divine fruit into Forefather Seven Absolutes' mouth. Merciless, quickly go to Seven Absolutes' sword palace and find 5 charming female disciples with good figures and bold behavior. Yi Chen Feng waved his hand and said, This, young noble Yi, why are you looking for female disciples? Merciless was dumbfounded. Forefather Seven Absolutes was dumbfounded. Tun Xiongling and the others were also dumbfounded. Why do you talk so much nonsense? Yi Chen Feng said angrily, Merciless, if you continue to talk nonsense, this bet is over. I will use bloody means to subdue all of you, and he will die without a doubt. Young noble Yi, don't be so agitated. I will go now. Thinking of the Seven Absolutes' old ancestor and the lives of the Seven Absolutes' Sword Palace's ancestor were still in Yi Qinfeng's hands. Zhu Wuqing endured the heavy injuries on his body and immediately found 5 extremely charming and hot female disciples from the Seven Absolutes' Sword Palace. You're wearing too much. Take off all your outer garments. Just your undergarments will do. Yi Qinfeng glanced at their chests. Big farts. The 5 female disciples ordered loudly. Young noble Yi, what are you doing? Forefather Seven Absolutes asked softly as he suddenly had an ominous thought. Helping you break through, Yi Qinfeng said indifferently. What are you still standing there for? Take off your clothes. Take them off. Merciless gritted his teeth and said, Young noble Ye's orders are my orders. I will kill whoever doesn't take them off. Yes. The 5 female disciples, who were usually bold and unrestrained, blushed in embarrassment. They took off their long dresses in an alluring manner, revealing their hot and delicate bodies. Nice figures. As Yi Qinfeng looked at the 5 flirtatious female disciples wearing undergarments, he nodded and said, Come, take this and flirt with him. As he spoke, Yi Qinfeng took out 5 long peacock feathers and handed them to the 5 female disciples of the Qijue Sword Palace. The eyes of the 5 flirtatious women widened, and they were dumbfounded. Although they were bold and unrestrained, they didn't dare to openly seduce the forefather of Seven Absolutes' Sword Palace. They weren't the only ones who were stunned. Forefather Seven Absolutes and Merciless were also stunned. Don't worry, his ancestral power is sealed, and he can't hurt you, Yi Qinfeng said indifferently. What are you all standing there for? Hurry up and seduce him. Otherwise, the medicine will take effect. Medicine. Forefather Seven Absolute's hair was about to explode at this moment. Fierce Spirit Devourer and Jean Soling, who were hiding in the distance, were trembling with fear. They secretly cursed Yi Qinfeng for being shameless while worrying about their own fate. Young noble Yi, what do you want? Forefather Seven Absolute's uneasiness grew stronger, and he felt like he was about to collapse. If you want me to submit, I will. You can't humiliate me like this. Do you think I have so much free time to humiliate you? Yi Qinfeng rolled his eyes at the exasperated forefather and said, I'm helping you break through. You will thank me in 3 days. Seeing that the 5 flirtatious female disciples didn't dare to flirt with Patriarch Seven Absolutes, Yi Qinfeng immediately condensed the illusion ancestral Dao diagram and controlled the minds of the 5 female disciples. He controlled them to gently move the peacock plume and the shriveled body of Patriarch Seven Absolutes. They were already charming to begin with. Now, they were only wearing red undergarments, causing their ample peaks to tremble slightly. Their legs emitted a lustrous luster as they constantly stimulated the forefather, causing his body to be seduced. The medicine slowly took effect, and a raging flame ignited in his heart. Soon, the powerful medicinal potency seeped into his body. He was like a crazed beast and roared. His body became restless, and his breathing became heavy. His eyes also turned crimson. The medicinal effect took effect. Under Yi Qinfeng's control, the 5 female disciples became even more unrestrained. Their swaying waists, their sexy movements, and their slightly parted red lips were like deadly poison, stimulating the 7 absolute old ancestor and causing him to break down.